Gailness, everybody. Michael finds that funny, but...
Sorry, that was the second take of that. I'm just going to laugh every time you say it.
He's too full of the Christmas spirit.
Christmas spirit and joy. It's not quite Christmas yet. We're recording this on Sunday. It's the 22nd of December at the moment. But the plan
you can't
is...
tell everybody that.
This is a secret. It's a secret. Planning to release this after Gail's final episode.
We knew that she was leaving.
Yeah.
We hid it from you.
We've tried our best to avoid talking about it on the podcast for the past 6 months.
I think we might have accidentally mentioned
it. We might have let it slip, possibly,
it was
that we
really
knew.
Hard
but
to
we do try our best to be spoiler-free.
We're supposed to be spoiler-free, but this was like everywhere.
This was quite good news.
Does anybody get to the episode and not know that Gail was leaving? I mean, she said she was going to France, but you can't believe anything she says.
Well, I know people are always saying they're going off this way or the other, and then something... I mean, we haven't watched the episode yet. Maybe the whole thing is a big ruse. And she might not have gone to France. Who knows? But
Southampton.
We might record a little bit of this episode after we've seen it as well. It's going to be a bit of a hodgepodge, but we couldn't let the occasion of Gail's departure from Coronation Street pass without doing some sort of tribute. So we're going to be giving you an A to Z of Gail. We've never done an A to Z before, have we?
No.
Going 12 and a half years, and this is the first A to Z. It feels like there's so much. We did do a character profile of Gail back in the very early days of the podcast. I think within the first year we did a Gail, and often we would do a catch up with some characters, but then Gail's not, had the biggest of stories in the past decade. So we thought, how can we revisit the whole half century of Gailness? And we thought that an A to Z might do the trick quite well. So we're going to be covering Gail's biggest stories, the characters that she's closest to, just kind of everything over the next couple of hours.
Some listeners might be confused.
Why?
It's an A to Z. No,
they're definitely not doing an A to Z.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just translating.
Thank you. If people watch Coronation Street, they know.
I know that in America they would say Z. I don't know in Canada.
No, they say Z in Canada. Just Americans that are different.
What about in New Zealand? What do they say?
Look, we see this could be a long episode, I don't know. So we're not doing our linguistic quibbles to begin with.
We're not doing
this is about
a character
Gail.
Profile because we've done one, probably, haven't we? For Gail, probably.
Well, I just literally said that.
I was thinking of my joke. And so she's been in it. Have you said how she's been in it? She's been in it. She's been in it. We're not. Yeah,
no, I have. I've said that she's been in it 50 years.
Yeah.
This is the top quality. I hope Helen Worth really appreciates this.
Well, we're sending this out as a pitch, aren't we, to ITV, to see if we can do some of the Talking Heads things.
Well, they're not making a Gail tribute documentary.
They've already made one.
Is the closest.
We've done that already.
They did it 10 years ago.
One.
We thought that she would take the hint then, but no, she clung on for another 10 years. No, this is our tributes to the lovely Gail. We absolutely adore Gail. And
we didn't want her to leave 10 years ago.
No, definitely
don't
not.
Don't want to leave now,
no. But, at least she's going out on a high, hopefully again. Maybe. We've not seen the episode yet.
Insert commentary on
and she
episode
just
here.
gets some kind of a story, and she's not just disappearing off and then turning up, and making a final appearance without us even realising. So Gail started on Coronation Street on the 29th of July 1974 and left in the future, as of recording, on the 25th of December 2024, and she has got just over 4,600 episodes under her belt. Now that is quite an achievement. It actually makes her the second most appearing character on Coronation Street. Yeah, and she should have kept going for a few more years. She could have actually overtaken Ken. Although he's showing no signs of slowing down, to be honest. Ken's had about 300 episodes more than Gail. She's been snapping at his heels for the last couple of years. But yeah, Ken is now just shy of 5,000. But 4,600 and a few is not to be sniffed at. And she's not going to be overtaken anytime soon either.
That's more episodes than we've done.
It is a little bit. Rita is third, for anyone that's wondering. She's about 600 episodes less than Gail, and I'm not expecting, considering how little she appears these days, for her to dislodge Gail's crown.
She has to turn up in one scene to go, yep.
I know, but
in the bag, baby.
Considering Gail has been doing about 60 episodes a year, and Rita's been doing a lot less than that in recent years.
Maybe she's going to step her game up. We don't know.
Who knows? But look, Gail's got quite a legacy here, so we're going to be A to Zing it, and hopefully you can play along and guess what letters we're going to do.
Yeah, what do you think is going to be A, and what do you think is going to be Z?
and all the ones in between.
You never guess.
The idea is that we're going to spend about we said we spend about 5 minutes on each letter, but we'll see how that plays out. We're not timing it. Otherwise, this could be quite epic. And we're going to the cinema later today. So we're going to crack things off. Is that the right word?
Crack him off?
Yeah, we're going to start things cracking. Look, let's just talk about A, okay? Gemma, A stands for Audrey. That's where Gail started, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the what's the thing?
She's the progenitor of Gail,
she's
or
the
mother,
maternal
also sort of said, yeah.
Origin of everyone.
Well, I think that's going to be a really that now that Gail is no longer with us, I'm going to definitely miss the Gail and Audrey relationship, which is the longest serving, the longest lasting mother daughter, or maybe even like just parent child in general relationship that we've seen on the show. And it's not like, you've had some characters that have come on and off over the years, but Gail and Audrey, once they arrived on the show, they have been there and stuck with us. So it's going to be leaving a real gaping gap there, isn't it?
Yeah, Audrey appeared after Gail, didn't she?
Yes, yeah, Gail came first. I don't think there was too long in between. Just a year or two.
How you do it in mother and daughter relationships. Normally the mum
TV,
comes first.
Yeah. Audrey's first appearance is quite notorious among Corrie fan circles, isn't it? Because it's Gail's 21st birthday, and Gail shows up. I think it's her birthday, is it? She's yeah, and
well, it's because the age gap between the two of them is quite, even in the show, is quite small. So Audrey gave birth to Gail when she was 18,
yes.
But in real life, they're only 7 years apart.
Yes.
And Gail had to get aged down a year so that Audrey could appear at her 21st birthday at Gail's birthday.
I'm so glad that they cast Sue Nichols as Audrey. I couldn't picture anything else. After 40 years, how could you? But they work so well as mother and daughter, and you don't see that, I can believe that there is an 18-year gap there. I just think they work brilliantly together.
I just like the way that they all despair of one another in the Platt family. It's one of my favourite things. But Audrey has always been a bit of a flighty bird, hasn't she? But although she's had a lot of boyfriends, she's not had as many husbands as Gail has had. No,
but she's certainly got her opinions on Gail's husbands. I think I'll miss that. We've been seeing just recently Audrey not too happy about Gail's choice of seventh husband, or eighth if you include the fact that Brian has already sorry, this is sixth, or seventh if you don't cover the fact that Brian got married to her twice, and I've not too much enjoyed that, but Audrey's criticism of her choice of next husband. But over the years we've seen so many wonderful Gail moments. There has been a lot of despair and head shakes, as you said, especially during the Richard Hillman saga. I think for me that was peak Audrey versus Gail, because they love each other and they're fantastic and they got brilliant chemistry, and there's been some lovely tender scenes, but there has been the fallouts, like when Audrey was convinced that Richard was wrong and she turned out to be right. What's been some of your top Audrey and Gail moments over the years?
I liked all the stuff that came out about Gail's dad, Ted, who was Audrey's partner.
Yeah, there was... Yeah, we went quite a long time into the Gail's time on the show before we found out more about her dad, didn't we?
Yeah, that's really weird.
The idea was that
Corrie wouldn't be able to handle that now, would they? They'd be like, right, we've got to do the reveal.
Oh, I don't know. We still don't know who Todd's dad is, But yeah, there was a lovely scene where Audrey sits Gail down and shows her a picture of Ted back, in the 40s. And yeah, those kind of moments are really, I totally buy their relationship. They've just had loads of lovely heart-to-hearts over the year, and she's always been there as somebody for Gail to confide in. She's had other friends, and we'll talk about those later, but Audrey being there as the grand matriarch of the family has been absolutely lovely.
And it's sort of sad. The thing about the Platts is that they have their kids young, don't they? And it's sad.
That's why we were able to get so many generations. That's what
I'm getting to. I'm sad that we're never going to see all the Platt women when Bethany has a baby.
Yeah, and that inevitability.
She's not to, but it is a soap, so I would be surprised if she didn't get pregnant within the year.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to get to see all. Maybe she might appear on FaceTime. I don't know.
I do wonder how Audrey's going to cope without Gail being there, and this is what she's been worried about. And the family have been around her. But Audrey having, she lives off of the street, doesn't she? She's holed up in Grasmere Drive a lot of the time, and I do hope that she's not going to be coming around to see Gail anymore, but I hope that she will be a character that
sure
the rest of the Platts can still continue to confide in. And she works at the salon, doesn't she? So that she'll be there.
I mean, Audrey's clearly going to be really upset when Gail leaves. And as we know, because we've all seen that episode, haven't we?
Don't spoil it.
But she's had her own health problems and, depression and suicidal thoughts. So she needs a lot of support, and I hope that the Platts will look after her.
I love how the difference in personality between Audrey and Gail, and the fact that Audrey, she was a bit of a terrible mum, wasn't she? Even right when Gail was really young, off screen, of course, and not.
She's
was preferring to go off being flighty and flirty with men and leaving Gail to raise herself.
Audrey is probably the biggest bimbo on Coronation Street, really.
And Gail's had to be kind of more of the sensible one over the year. But I think that's one of the things that makes the chemistry work so well, that they are similar in many ways, but also very different. And it's almost like an Eddie and Safi absolutely fabulous relationship in a way, isn't it? With Gail being the more despairing of her flighty mum.
Oh, these flighty mums.
They've been, absolutely superb, and a very deserving A. Shall we move on to our B? What's B, Gemma?
B is for BAFTA nomination. Yeah. Must-see moment, 2019.
Gail almost picked up, Helen Worth almost picked up a BAFTA in 2019 for the must-see moment. And we will be talking about some of our favourite Gail quotes later, no doubt. But this moment... really struck a chord with lots of Corrie viewers in the wake of when Aidan's suicide in 2018. And one of the great things about that episode was how different all the other characters reacted to it. Johnny and Kate and Beth and all the others. And it was all kind of capped off towards the end of the episode with Gail looking through the window and delivering this fabulous monologue, talking about how she says 40 years I've lived on this street. That's not quite true, Gail, but never mind. And it's all talking about how you think you know what's going on in people's lives, and you don't want to be nosy, but we all look after each other, and but you think you know each other, but then there's things like this going on. And she sort of says, happened, we've all been sleeping, ma'am. I can't help thinking about poor Johnny, his son's not coming home tonight. It was a really, really wonderful little speech there, and it's definitely a Corrie clip show moment for the ages, isn't it? What's your thoughts on Gail's monologue?
This really went down very well, I think, with lots of people. It was the must-see moment is a publicly voted award, and it lost out to The Bodyguard, I think, which was
it was The Bodyguard.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice because it's one of these things that is relatable, and also it sort of summed up Coronation Street, and they don't do these meta things that much because it would just get, they could do it every episode if they wanted to, but it just kind of it's just her paying tribute really to the story in character. Yeah.
I also appreciated the fact that it was a more serious Gail moment in the midst of, her last decade. She has been a little bit nutty, hasn't she? She's been turned into a little bit more of a comedic character. But Gail, right back from, through the 80s, 90s, had some super serious storylines, and Gail Worth put in fabulous performance. Helen Worth, put in fabulous performance after fabulous performance. And this just showed what a cracking pair of acting chops she's got. And it's a shame that Corrie...
A pair of acting chops?
Well, yeah, why not?
All right.
You lost my train
I've never heard of that, of being a pair of chops.
Well, she can have 3 if she likes. She can have 50 for all as far as I'm concerned.
One for every year.
Exactly. So it's a shame she didn't get the award, but the fact that Corrie was nominated, which doesn't happen too often, that soaps get BAFTA nominations outside the soap awards. That's certainly something that Corrie should be proud of, and Helen Worth, and the writer who I cannot remember who wrote that. Was it Jonathan Harvey? It might have been, not sure. There we go. B for BAFTA nomination. C is for Carmel Finnan. Now, this is a character who was a little bit before my time when I first started watching Coronation Street in the mid-90s, but I do remember my parents talking a lot about her and what a big impression this nasty nanny made on them. And when I finally got to see the story myself, I loved it. Carmel was a really interesting and complex character, and Corrie doesn't do very many female villains, does it? And you know, so it's not, doesn't take much to be up there in the rankings of best Coronation Street villains, but she really was quite a chilling kind of character at times. Basically, for those who haven't seen the story, you got Martin and Gail have got their 3 kids at this point. This is the early 90s this was going on, and Martin is training to be a nurse. And his classmate Carmel is also a nanny, so she agrees to do a bit of babysitting for them. But yeah, before long she's developed this really psycho-ish obsession with Martin and kind of convinces herself that she's in love with him, and there's one point where she takes David to the shops and then tells everybody that he's her baby. She tries to steal David from Sally one time when Sally's looking at, and
just to be clear, this is David the child, not David the dog.
Not David the dog. He wasn't around back then. No, thank you. She was utterly nuts. But at the end of the story, you do end up feeling a bit sorry for Carmel, because she goes to the hospital, and then her granddad comes over from Ireland, because she was an Irish character, and saying, oh, she's had troubles like this before, and she's developed obsessive tendencies with other boyfriends, and it's kind of like a mental health story before mental health stories were just there to raise issues of them, I suppose, and you're allowed to wallow in the sheer villainy and nutty craziness of this character who was utterly obsessed with Martin and wanting to take over Gail's place in his life. And she'd go and see Sally and say, oh, me and Martin, we're madly in love with each other, and Martin didn't really have much of an idea that this was going on at one point. But there's one really creepy scene where he's alone in the house at night, and he's in bed, and then you see her creeping in and lying next to him in the bed. Gail's, I can't remember, I think she might be at the hospital at this point. I think it was when Alf was maybe in hospital. And Carmel comes in and puts her hand over him, and it's like, oh my gosh. She then convinces Martin that she's pregnant with his baby and goes around telling everybody this. And obviously driving quite a wedge between Martin and Gail, and it led to a brilliant confrontation between Carmel and Gail over at Carmel's student digs at the top of the stairs. And to cut a long story short, Carmel ends up taking a bit of a tumble. Gail didn't push, they just had a bit of a tussle there, because Carmel was threatening to take Martin away from her, basically, and
such a catch.
He is such a catch, Martin Platt, and she has this epic stairs fall that honestly really does rival Gail's one herself, that she would just be taking 15 odd years later. But obviously you think that she's maybe pregnant at the time, and then she goes to hospital. It turns out it's all fabricated. This woman only made 39 appearances in Coronation Street, and it was in my heart just like a really great example of a short-lived but really effective and chilling kind of character, and it makes me just yearn for there to be more female villains on Coronation Street. This was really kind of peak Platt's gold in the 1990s. It's from this point onwards that I think Gail's character appearances start to balloon. No, start to balloon after this, and kind of cements them as one of the main characters, families of the street. But I know you've been keeping fairly quiet during this, because this isn't a story you've seen much of, is it? But no. I think that you would really like her. You've seen a few scenes of her. I think it's a sort of story that you could,
maybe if I got to watch a compilation video or something.
I'm sure there must be one out there on YouTube. Thing is about great stuff, honestly.
Female Corrie villains, like you said, very few of them around, but it's always about a man or a baby, isn't it?
Well, that's
I mean, what else is there?
What else is there for a woman to get obsessed about?
Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah. Not the favourite perfume brands or flowers.
You're wearing the dress I wanted to wear to a party.
Anyway, yeah. So if you haven't checked out any of Carmel's scenes, much like Gemma here, I'm sure there's plenty of compilations on YouTube. She's a really great character and not dead yet. So don't think there's really anything that could get her to come back to the street.
Well, she's not going to come back and snatch David now, is she? He's rubbish. Nobody would want him to be their son.
I'm sure Shona wouldn't mind somebody taking him off her hands every now and then when he gets a little bit too annoying.
Speaking of
David, Gemma, this is what D stands for. D for David. How could it be anything else? I'll let you chat for a little bit about Demon David.
Demon David. It could have gone
to Gail.
that way too. And it's not, again, just to reiterate, it's not David the dog. It's David the son. Now he's got a really fascinating relationship with Gail, and it's one of the things that I'm going to miss, because they always had conflict, and it's kind of mellowed a lot in recent times because he was very evil towards her, and he's so mean he doesn't even call her mum, calls her Gail.
He just calls her Gail, doesn't he?
And that's kind of gone on to other members of the family not calling their parents.
It's a bit like you get Bart Simpson calls Homer as well, and it's just a nice easy way to in TV to show just a bit of disrespect. David's disrespect for Gail, a lot of that stemmed from the Richard Hillman saga, which we'll talk more on later, I'm sure.
Well, he had a bit of a reign of terror, and Gail was his target, wasn't she?
Because he blamed her for getting tied up and driven into a canal, basically. He was such a nice boy before the the early 2000s when Jack P. Shepherd was cast as him. He was very, just stood there in the back of scenes. He didn't have much of a personality, but when Jack was given this role, he owned it, and he's one of Corrie's best characters. And we talked earlier about Audrey and Gail being this longest running parental relationship on Coronation Street, but I think in terms of complexity, Gail and David is right up there, don't you?
Yeah, and it is interesting too, because obviously he's the baby, isn't he, of the family, and he's the only child that she had with Martin Platt. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And so that when the marriage broke down, it affected David quite a lot.
Yeah, I suppose that was part of it. Maybe that was the beginning of
this
it.
Was
and
in the 90s.
Then the Hillman came. Yeah, late 90s was when Martin and Gail's marriage break down, and David wasn't happy about that, and then Richard coming along just made things worse.
Now, as a child that was growing up in the 90s, I was like, 10 going up to being a teenager, 8 to 10. I remember fiction kind of exploded with divorced parents in this time, because I think it got easier to divorce in America, and lots of children's stories used to start off with your parents are dead, and now it starts off with your mum's a businesswoman and she's divorced your dad, and so this was really interesting that Coronation Street had a sort of story about a child that was troubled. I mean, he didn't go around and what do children in divorced children do? I don't know, set traps. It wasn't.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm trying to think. Like he wasn't a cheerful scamp about it, was he?
No.
He became Demon David, and as things.
At one point he went. This was not just a result of the divorce, but he goes smashing up the street with a crowbar.
Well, he's done loads of terrible things, hasn't he? And I mean, he had a terrible childhood, because for lots of children, just your parents getting divorced would be a really bad thing that would affect you. But for David, he's been kidnapped. They tried to kill. Richard Hillman tried to kill him. Lots of terrible things have happened, and he reacted badly and violently. So yeah, running around with a crowbar. Pushing Gail down the stairs when he got a bit older. He had a relationship with Tina, and Gail encouraged Tina to abort their child.
Well, yeah, that's what led to the stairs push, didn't it? And that was a brilliant Gail and David moment. You don't get to go upstairs in the Platt, any house very much on Coronation Street.
Unless you're going to fall down the stairs.
But yeah, exactly. When two characters at the top of the stairs, you know something bad's going to happen there. But yeah, David pushing Gail down the stairs was probably... Was that the worst thing that he's done to her? I don't know. I mean, what about the time when it was Sarah and Jason's wedding and David drove back into the same canal that Richard had driven them into?
Just for attention.
It was literally just for attention. He left a suicide note, and then he comes back after ruining the wedding day, just kind of smirking about the fact that he's caused chaos.
Yeah, this is like, just to be clear, this is not like he didn't have a mental health crisis. He was doing it on purpose, because we know that because he smirked at Sarah and sort of said, I've done, I've won. I've won this day, and it was all about me, not you.
There was also the great story that's going to be coming up soon on Classic on ITV3, where Gail starts receiving greetings cards through the post signed by Richard Hillman, and it turns out that it's David just taunting her, and he was just wanted to torture her, didn't he? And poor old Gail, it was,
Gail's a bit of a pushover.
Nobody would deserve what she got, but poor old Gail,
Gail's not she is very strong because she has to be to get through everything that she's done in life, but she's got a kind of simple kind of weakness for her children, especially. Like, remember that time when he was throwing peanuts at her?
Yeah, that was
just really pathetic.
I think that was following
kind
Gail,
of like he's smacking them away.
Yeah, that was following Gail keeping Kylie's secret that she'd had a one-night stand with Nick, I think.
Who's the daddy?
And the whole who's the daddy thing. And David, just throwing these peanuts at her, starting off kind of really slow and then just going to full-on pelt mode.
Is this a playful? No, he's actually mad and he's chucking them to try and hurt her.
And
with a peanut.
Gail has thrown David out of the house on numerous occasions, but I could never imagine her abandoning him for good, because she is a really caring mum. She's obsessed with her children. I think her children are one of the things, probably the thing that she is most proud of in her whole life, and she's just will put up with anything that David will throw at her, and maybe that is that bad. I think she'll put up with this abuse.
I think a lot of the time she puts up with it because she blames herself for what's happened.
Yeah,
because David has gone through a lot of stuff that. It's not Gail's fault, but the circumstances only arose because of her actions.
Yeah, definitely. Another great David and Gail moment, I remember the Demon David, was the Christmas 2006 story where he finds Granny Ivy's diary up in the attic and then comes down and starts reading extracts from it, including the fact that he'd discovered that Gail had tried to abort him. I mean, again, perfectly understandable that somebody with already a weak grip on the. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. But
he's got a poor relationship with her already.
Yeah, this just would shatter it to find out that she wanted to have him aborted. So he comes down and reads that, and then he kind of screws things up for his granddad. Sorry, not his granddad. For Bill, who was going out with Audrey at the time, by revealing to Bill's wife Maureen that they're having an affair. He just really was
chaos.
Peak David. You're right. He is totally chaotic, and I think it shows Gail's strength of character in a way that she hasn't been, driven insane by
anyone
it
else
and completely discommunicated from him.
I don't think David's her favourite child.
No, I don't think so.
Nick.
But I would say that theirs is the most interesting and well developed.
Way more.
The fact that they still live with each other. But David's not really moved out of that place, has he? There was,
he moved out to prison.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's been Gail owning the house. They went through this little period a few years ago where David owned it until Gail bought it back when it was up for auction. But they've been in each other's pockets like for 35 years now. So they know each other inside and out, and they're just putting up with each other. And much like the best sitcoms, your chalk and cheese characters thrown into these unescapable situations with each other. I think that's what we've got with David and Gail here. The sarcastic put downs, the outright insults, and what can she do, because she's his mum and she loves him and
she lives with him.
Yeah. So she put up with it. It's not all been at loggerheads, has it? Because they still do love each other.
They're really close. They're so close to each other. She supported him after he was assaulted. They have had some really hard for tender scenes. It's hard for him to open up, but I think one of the few people he does open up to are his family, and Gail is kind of sometimes been there when she's always been there for him, but he didn't always want to comfort him.
I am quite interested as well. We were talking about it with Audrey earlier, to see how David copes without Gail, and he would always have said, I can't wait to get rid of you, but actually without her being there in his life, this present figure constantly, as I say, for the past 35 years, what effect will that have on his character? Is he going to be kind of lost? Is he going to go off the rails again because he hasn't got his mum there to go, oh, David, at him? I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out. It's they're one of Corrie's best double acts, and sad that it's over. But let's move on to E. It's another character. This is Eileen.
That's right. Is this one of Corrie's longest running feuds? I think it must be.
I think so. I mean, back in the early days, you had Ina and Elsie, didn't you, at loggerheads?
Yeah.
And often, they'd be coming to the pub together and just give each other glares. And this is the closest we've got, I think, to it re-embodying that, because you've had your big moments and your full-out fights, but even there's always something great about a scene, usually in the pub, where the two of them, well, one of them's in there already, the other one walks in, and they'll still exchange glances at each other, won't they? Or put down their nose at each other.
If I was going to pick a fight with anyone on the street, it wouldn't be Eileen. I think Gail's a bit unmatched here, don't you? Because Eileen loves holding a grudge. She's got no boundaries when it comes to being insulting or sarcastic. She's a bit like David in a way.
Well, yeah, you're right. And this is one of the things that we really liked about Eileen when she first came in, because she was just the sarky lady on the switch at Streetcars, wasn't she? And so she's got this brilliant, dry, cruel sense of humour.
She does.
But I think because Gail is a bit of a wet blanket. I mean, I think she used to be a stronger, more fiercer character than she's grown now. But hey, we all change. I'm not going to hold that against her.
Well, I think it
makes
sense how she's changed.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she's been through the ringer. I think it would do a number on any of us. But she's very easily pick-onable by Eileen.
I know.
And even just what we saw recently at the hen do, where Eileen was making fun of her during the quiz and making jokes about all her dead husbands.
She has got a mockable life, hasn't she, Gail?
She does. And it's, you got to suspend your disbelief a little bit with any soap characters. If this woman's had all these dead husbands, I think that
it might be a bit mean to point it out.
Yeah, it would be a little bit,
but it's hilarious when Eileen does it. Yeah. So did this feud begin when Sarah and Todd started dating?
Yeah.
So much like our other what's the word? Heir and pride and joy of a family, Daniel. Todd had a bright future ahead of him before a woman came and ruined it all.
Yeah, stopped him going to Oxford.
Todd, he was supposed to go to Oxford, but Sarah started dating him, and then he decided not to go. And then there's a massive fight. This is the big fight that we all remember in 2004, when Gail finds out that Todd is gay and Eileen knew, and this didn't go down very well with her.
No, this is.
I don't know that they would have done this now, but this was totally.
There were definitely some un-PC lines that were uttered by Gail during this. Yeah,
for sure. And so they had this big brawl, didn't they?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Gail striding up to Eileen's house in her dressing gown. I read somewhere Helen saying that they had to literally sew her into her dressing gown during that scene, otherwise it'd just keep flying open as they were rolling over the cobbles. But it is funny because Eileen is quite a tall character, and wee little Gail standing up to her is a little bit like a little terrier standing up to a bulldog. But grabbing hold of her, rolling around on the cobbles, the hair pulling, that's really where it all started. And I'm gonna say it probably is. Is it Corrie's most memorable fight?
There have not been very many actual fights between women.
No, I wouldn't say there's been lots of full-on lengthy fights in Corrie as a whole. General. I mean, you'd have Ken Barlow striding into the factory and then boffing Mike on the nose once.
The Christmas Day, Nick and Peter.
Yeah.
That was a very long. I love these scenes. I think it was great, this scene.
Yeah, it is fantastic, and so many great lines as well. We'll come to Gail's quotes later, so I won't spoil it now. But you know the funny line when Jason then strides down the road after it. But this is where it all kicks off, and it's kind of had peaks and troughs over the year. I think in real life, what is going to be 20-year odd feud like this isn't going to be burning strongly all the way through it. But they had another fight.
You'd have to be a bit of a psychopath, really, to keep it going.
They did fight over Michael Rodwell after Eileen stole Gail's fifth husband away from him, and that was that was the one that was in the hairdressers. Do you remember? And they were throwing shampoo around, and then that cascades onto the street as well. Yeah,
because Eileen's wearing a bib thing.
Yeah, hairdresser's bib or cloak or whatever they're called, and that was clearly supposed to be harkening back to the big fight. But you're never gonna outclass the biggest and the best. I don't think.
Well, they did this with Elsie and Enid, didn't they? They had
a couple of slanging matches in the street.
This is not the only time that they've fought over a man, because they both wanted Phil.
Yeah, we're just seeing this on Classic at the moment. Phil Nell, the reflexologist, who Gail's dating towards the end of 2005. Eileen kind of fancied him, and that's quite a nice idea to have the two of them fighting over a man rather than fighting over their children for once. And well, speaking of men as well, you've also the fact that Eileen's dating George, that caused a little bit of friction as well, because Gail is kind of related to George in a way.
Fanny thing.
Yeah, Gail's great grandma is a long distant relative of George as well. So yeah, it's just brilliant whenever they have cause to clash. But they like with David and Gail as well. The fact that they have this fight, it makes the kind of more heartwarming and touching, tender moments all the more special. I mean, just a few years ago, they had that lovely scene where Gail and Eileen went to the bench in the Victoria Gardens.
Yeah,
do you remember? The tribute to the Manchester bombing, and the pair of them.
They spoke about
it, laid some flowers down, and having
I can't believe that this happened.
Yeah, and having those two characters being the ones to unite to pay tribute to the bombing victims was just perfect.
I mean, they haven't quite buried the hatchet, have they? Because now the feud has been rekindled, because Jessie is actually Eileen's ex, and so she did not like that, and it's also caused a bit of friction between her and George too. So
yeah, it has. I mean, I think it would have been nice to have made a bigger thing over Eileen's the fact that hatred of Gail, and the fact that she was dating her ex. But I think the fact that the quick rewriting of this story
necessitated
by the off-screen means was meant that they couldn't change it too much. But yeah, I think that it's one of Corrie's best ever long-running feuds, and we talk about Ken and Mike, but Gail and Eileen is right up there. Love it, absolutely love it, and it's going to be sad when she's gone. Now she's gone.
Eileen, it could have been enemies, couldn't it? Instead of for E.
Yeah, it could have been enemies.
Enemies, we move now to friends. F is for friends.
Yeah, let's talk about some of Gail's friends then. When Gail's first appearance on the street was coming in as a friend. She's one of these characters that didn't come in as a,
we're going to have a new character.
In her own right. She was Trisha Hopkins' friend, and Gail's very first scene was she was sitting on the bench that's where, the very narrow gap left where number 7 had collapsed, and she's there talking to Trisha, and Jerry Booth, I think, comes along. This is an era of what? Was
it Len or
might have been? I don't remember.
What's the other one?
Ray.
I think it was Ray. I can't remember.
This was an era that we will both hold our hands up and say that we've not seen a whole lot of, have we? So we can't speak too much about Trisha, or indeed Susie, who becomes Gail's next friend after Trisha moves on.
Well, this was what year was this?
This was 74.
So Coronation Street had a smaller cast then, and they could spend a bit more time on people being friends with each other, because it was already quite established in the show right from the very beginning that you'd have like a couple of girls who were friends with each other.
Yeah, right from the beginning you had like Doreen Lostock, for example, and they would share a flat together, and they just have fun and parties. And I think that's what they wanted with Trisha. Like this was now 14 years into the show, and these other characters had gone, and they wanted to maybe bring in a few more younger characters, just rejuvenate the cast a little bit. So it was a really good move. It's
funny though, because Gail was literally just created to be Trisha's friend, and Gail's gone on to be one of the biggest characters, top 3 character in the show.
Yeah.
Helen Worth actually auditioned to play Trisha originally. I bet she's glad that she didn't get that part.
Well, what would have
happened if she had?
I mean, the Hopkins family were a little bit of a disaster anyway. With Trisha was soon, very quickly, the only one left, because the rest of the Hopkins did a flit, didn't they, in the middle of the night, or over the whole corner shop debacle and Betty being Gordon's mum, etc., etc. So maybe had Helen made that big an impression, maybe Trisha would have stayed on. Maybe. We'd be celebrating her 50 years now. But she was soon replaced in Gail's heart by Susie Birchall. She's the one who they rode a tandem together. If you've all seen that classic scene of the pair of them wobbling down the cobbles on the back of a tandem.
And they lived at number 11 with Elsie. And so, you know, Gail being Elsie Tanner's lodger is probably a long forgotten fact by most people, but you know, that's how long Gail's been in the show.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. We haven't seen loads of those episodes, so when we see the clips and the compilations of Gail, then it's suddenly she's in a scene with the likes of Elsie Tanner or Ina Sharples.
You're like, what?
Because she has seen it all.
Because I think it's because Rita and Ken just seem older, don't they? So you kind of like, oh yeah, of course they were back in it in the day. But Gail, I don't know, Gail's kind of like, she reached middle age, I think, quite early, and then stayed there. I don't think she's really, doesn't feel like an older woman to me.
Yeah.
But I think it's her hair, her very lovely bob. I mean, B could have been for Bob, but she's also, as she grew and matured, she became friends with Alma, didn't she? And she was colleagues. It was a different kind of friendship because they were colleagues at the cafe for years.
Yeah, you're right. I think that this is. I probably would say that this is Gail's most significant friendship. I don't know whether it's going to be a toss-up between Alma and Sally, really. I think with Sally, obviously they've known each other longer, but the way Corrie currently works is that you'll often forget that Gail and Sally even know each other, and then they'll have a scene every now and then and say, "Oh, let's have a gossip." Like there was a brilliant scene a few years ago where Gail and Sally were in the Rovers. It was during the Tim's impotency storyline, and Gail then starts talking about all the sexual prowess or lack thereof of all her various husbands, and that was a brilliant Sally Gail moment. But those kind of moments really are few and far between. I think, you know, back in the 90s, they would have a few more scenes together.
We're going to talk about Alma.
Yeah, we can go back. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk about
Alma?
Alma?
You're talking about Sally now.
Yeah, so we're just talking about our friends in general.
Okay, well, really, but by the end of it, Alma become more Audrey's friend than Gail's anyway.
Exactly.
But what you're saying is right about Sally, because they're the same age, similar ages. They both had children at the same time.
Well, yeah, there was literally a day between Rosie and David being born.
Martin and Kevin were friends, and so they had this foursome going on, and they were like, just pals. Like you would, I think loads of people have got a couple that they're really close to who are in similar circumstances to them.
Yeah.
And this was a nice thing to see on the screen. But obviously, as they've grown older and their children have grown as well, they've grown apart, which a lot of people also could probably, see.
It's definitely relatable, but they still live like right next door to each other, so you only got so much excuse.
But the thing is, though, Martin and Kevin seemed like they were more friends than Sally and Gail. So they were just friends because they were mums, and I think loads of women have got this experience too of being friends with other mums because your children are the same age.
Yeah.
And then when you get older, you kind of grow apart a bit more.
Yeah. But going back to what we were saying with Alma, that was kind of a work relationship, but it seems to be one that's been forgotten a little bit about over the time, and I don't know whether it was because Alma ended up being Audrey's friend, like you said. They were definitely more working together in an era that we didn't particularly watch. I mean, it was during the 80s and the 90s, well, late 80s, 90s. Maybe I was watching it, but I see them more as being work colleagues, but they were definitely friends, and Alma was
Alma was just really nice.
Alma was just lovely. She was a great listening ear during all of Gail's many woes.
Alma's one of those few characters on Corrie that you think, I would actually really like to be this person's friend, and she wasn't boring. Because a lot of the ones you think, they could be my friend, it's because they're chill and they don't get up to stuff. And Alma definitely still had her fair share of drama.
Yeah, she did. I mean, she was a bit of a bad friend sometimes too. Like, she'd always be leaving Gail in the lurch at the shop while she swanned off to the shops, often with Audrey.
To buy a new neckerchief.
Yeah, but it's sad times when Alma died in 2001.
Well, it wasn't Gail that was late to the death.
No,
it was
no.
Audrey.
I just want to campaign for more friends in Coronation Street, full stop. So it's nice that Gail has had a number over the years.
Well, see, we've listed like four really big characters. I know that lots of people don't remember Trisha or Susie that well, but four big characters that she'd been friends with over the years. And these days, what could you say about anybody who's in the show? Who are their friends? Yeah. They don't really have any.
It would have been lovely if any of these could have had more of a either come back in the case of Trisha, or had more of a thing for Sally in Gail's exit story. because we've not seen a whole lot of Sally here, have we, in the last couple of months? And obviously Trisha's not come back to the show. Some people were saying that she should have been the one. I was certainly thinking it was quite a good idea as well, that could have come in and driven off into the sunset on a tandem with Gail. But as I say, the hasty rewrites of this exit story necessitated it being quite similar to how it originally would have played out, I think. So that's one for the fan fiction, maybe. Let's move on to G. What we got here?
G is for Gemma.
Not for... No.
Because I like Gail. G is
No,
for
it's
Gail.
not. No, Grandkids.
No, it's for Grandkids.
Grandkids. Gail's grandkids. She's got a few, hasn't she? She's got
she
Bethany,
started a lot
she's got
sooner than
Harry.
she thought she was going to with this, because Sarah had her baby very young, as we all know. And this was one of the making of Gail really as a big character in that period of time, because she's, you know, one of the most famous controversial scenes in Coronation Street's history is Sarah and Gail being told that Sarah's pregnant. So that kind of kicked off the drama there. And
yeah, I think often when characters on Corrie have younger kids, they can often fade into the background a little bit because they're just there raising kids. But this was, quite soon after Tina O'Brien was cast in the role of Sarah and Jack P. Shepherd as David. So it like breathed a new lease of life into the Platt family. And really this was like a golden age for Gail.
It is a golden era for her, because we had the kind of tension and conflict between Sarah and Gail, because Sarah was not ready for a baby. She was a schoolgirl. She didn't really want to look after Bethany a lot. And
there
was at school
there was
the
lots
time.
of great conflict, wasn't there, with Gail saying, "No, you
raise
need to
the
look
baby.
after Gail." Yeah, because she wants Gail to do it. She wants Sarah to go to school, so she is left holding the baby. But equally, Sarah wants to go out partying with Candice in the evenings, and Gail's like, "No,
you've got
this is your life now."
Yeah.
I think Bethany is probably the grandchild of Gail's who has got the closest relationship with them we've seen more screen time with. Again, it's partly a symptom of the fact that Gail hasn't been on the show as much in the past decade, but I couldn't speak so much as to, what does Gail think of Sam, what does Gail think of Lily. They just, they've had a few scenes together and that's kind of it, isn't it? Which is a shame, especially with Sam, because he's such a great actor. Sam's very first scene meeting Gail was over Zoom. That was quite a very modern thing to happen. But I think that Gail makes a good grandparent. But like you said, she's more the right sort of grandparent age now than she was when Sarah first gave birth, because nobody was expecting that. But it made a very great story. The other thing I remember with Gail being a grandma with Sarah and Bethany was when she reported Sarah and Todd to social services because Sarah was being such a terrible mum to Bethany, and Bethany gets electrocuted in the flat, and Gail reports those shocking stuff. But then that, unfortunately for her, led to Sarah
turning to her other grandparents.
Turning to the paternal grandmother, Brenda, who also turned out to be a bit of a nut job, didn't she? And tried jumping off the church roof with Bethany there. So that's baby Bethany and Gail. There was some great moments there, but I think Gail's best relationships are with her mum and her children rather than her grandparents, don't you? Grandchildren, don't you?
Yeah, I don't think our grandparents are in it.
I don't think they are, no.
Right. Okay, what could H be for?
H is for Hillman.
But Hillman.
Yes.
I mean, what happened there? He's such a charming man. I can't remember what went wrong, but they're not going out together now, are they?
Richard Hillman is one of Corrie's greatest ever characters, and he's definitely right up there as one of the most iconic villains, vying only with Pat Phelan in the hearts of many a Corrie fan.
Really,
but this was the story that got you into Corrie, wasn't it?
I loved it. I was like, what? This show's
early
got
days.
Serial killers and people driving into canals.
What's your reflections on that? And how Gail and Richard got on in that whole story?
It wasn't just, something that we liked, because this was hugely popular at the time too. It was it had Corrie's biggest viewing figures of the decade when they had the two-hander between Gail and Richard. That
was such a great episode.
So he just turned out to be a serial killer. He was a businessman who was in over his head in debt. He let what's his face die, Dougie.
Mm-hmm.
He fell over there's a scuffle and he fell over the
He
side.
fell over the banister,
and then he
didn't he?
bonked his wife over the head with a shovel and buried her body. They all started getting a bit too much. Audrey and Archie and Norris all investigating him and breathing down his neck.
And Gail was just utterly devoted to the idea that this man was the perfect gent for her,
quite
and how on
often-
earth could anybody be suspicious of him?
These kind of villains will come in and they'll want to whisk the woman away to some fancy big house somewhere, and that's what they were doing, wasn't it? They were planning to move into a nice big house that Richard was going to buy.
I think
them.
eventually that was the plan, yeah.
It all went a bit wrong because he, like I said, he was a serial killer.
That does tend to put a dampener on a relationship, doesn't it? But the thing is, he did love her, and
I think he was the one who loved her the most.
do you reckon?
He would kill for her, so I mean, that's
Well,
pretty
this is
sexy.
this is one of the things he says in that two-hander, wasn't it? I mean, again, if you haven't seen the two-hander episode between Richard and Gail, it's definitely up there with one of Corrie's best episodes ever. It's got so many great lines on. It's got a little
quotable
physical
lines.
tussle between them where he throws her over the sofa, and she learns the whole sordid truth about everything that's been going on. You didn't even mention Maxine being killed earlier, but that was probably
he killed Maxine.
the biggest, most climactic death of them all. It was such an amazing story, and
Trying to forget because it hurts my heart to remember that
but
poor young woman.
the fact that he
Cut down on
did
her
it
crime.
because he did love Gail, and
Well-
I think the leaving Dougie to die was advantageous for him
Coronation
financially,
Street.
and Patricia was a thorn in his side, so
Coronation Street's
it was
villains
kind of an
always
accidental murder,
always
wasn't it?
start off and sort of wet their whistle with a bit of accidental killing, and then gradually work their way up to more and more fiendish.
But I don't think that
kills.
even with Richard we got to see the likes of Pat.
No,
Phelan,
they're getting
who-
more evil every time.
Car chase followed by firing the gun at him and making his car explode.
Richard's
Even with
got-
Maxine, he didn't. Well, he had plotted to kill Emily, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yes, the murder of Maxine was
Oops.
accidental. She was a bit collateral damage in that story, wasn't she? But again, he did it because, well, there's no excuse for it. But the way the story filled that 2002-2003 period, you could almost build up some sort of sympathy for Richard and understand why he would do it.
Richard's got the quotes, he's got the props, he's got the stunt.
Yeah.
One of the most famous villains in Coronation Street, probably her most famous husband.
I think it's hard, isn't it? Because when you think of Gail, if you were to ask a man or a woman on the street, show them a picture and say, "Who's this?" They'll say Gail Platt. Even though she's had so many surnames over the years, Platt's the one that stuck, and she was Gail Platt for, I don't know, 10 years or so. So
But
maybe
Martin
that's
was
the reason.
boring. He didn't kill
maybe
anybody.
that's the reason, and she was only
Well,
Gail
he did
Hillman
kill
for a
one
little
person
while.
by accident, didn't he? I can't remember.
But who?
Martin.
What are
at
you
work.
talking about?
Well, didn't he get in trouble about somebody dying once?
No,
Nurses always seem to get in trouble. on
Somebody
Coronation Street for killing
died while
somebody.
he was at work once, a little kid, but that wasn't
Wasn't
his
his
fault. So I think
Yeah,
that
so-
he's the most exciting husband. Martin was a little bit bland, and we'll talk a bit more about him later. I think that certainly was the biggest story, and that's, if you were to say to, again, man on the street, name a Gail story, people would say when she was married to a serial killer. So
Yeah.
maybe you're right, maybe he is the most famous one.
Well, I mean, it kicked off so much that came afterwards. You could say that Richard Hillman was the most influential character on Gail.
Yeah, it was the boost for the Platts for the next 10 years. I mean, a lot
Well,
of the
it's what-
2000s
yeah.
and 2010s were Platt-centric, weren't they? And a lot of it's,
David,
yeah.
becoming Demon David.
like we said earlier.
The cards, selling the cards.
Even like the curse of Richard
Richard Hillman.
Hillman's story when he, and we'll probably talk about this later when we discuss Lewis. But yeah, Richard has been an ever-present spectre hanging over number 8
spectre.
Coronation Street. Just brilliant. And
Ghostly
like
appearing
you said,
after death.
Yes. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that later as well. Absolutely iconic character. Like you said, it's what got you into Coronation Street. It's the earliest story that you remember. I just remember watching it and feeling that Corrie was in such a golden age back in that 2002-2003 period. Absolutely iconic baddie. seems very fitting to have him paired up with one of the street's most iconic ladies, I suppose.
And their wedding was the first soap wedding to have an OK magazine photo spread.
All right,
which is super important to recognise.
I next. So
now here's a question.
Yeah.
Out of between who we're going to talk about in a minute and Richard Hillman, who do you think she disliked the most? Who do you think was more of a thorn in her side? I'm not sure it wasn't.
Ivy Brennan, Ivy Tilsley.
Poison Ivy
She didn't
Brennan.
dislike Richard for most of the story,
So
did
really,
she?
you're saying Ivy was the bigger villain?
Well, Ivy was the biggest annoyance to Gail, even though she didn't quite go to the same lengths as Richard did. No, I thought we had to mention Ivy as part of this.
Ivy is brilliant.
The mother-in-law from hell, Lynn Perry, played it absolutely brilliantly. This was definitely before our time, but we've seen...
I've seen quite a lot.
You've seen quite a lot of it.
Of her worst moments.
Yeah. I think it's a bit unfortunate that Ivy seems to have been forgotten a little bit about as a character. I don't know what people think about that. Do people still remember her fondly? I know some people do, but she hasn't gone down in Corrie history in quite the same way as some of the really
she didn't catch
early...
imagination as much.
No.
But it's a shame, like you say, because Lynn Perry played this character so well because you could see where she was coming from, even though obviously you really disagree with her, but she was able to still make you sympathise with her when terrible things happen, and she was crying about it, even though a lot of it was her own fault.
Ivy was a really complex character.
Yeah, she was. She's one of the most complicated characters on Corrie.
Yeah, some absolutely hated her. I loved her, and I'm sure that had social media been a thing back in the late 80s, early 90s, there'd be a lot of back and forth between, is Ivy justified for doing what she's doing to Gail? Because
I think a lot of Corrie characters make bad decisions and things happen, and then stuff spirals out. But Ivy was a real instigator. She was behind a lot. She made things happen, and a lot of them were really bad.
A lot of it came down from her very devout Catholic beliefs as well, didn't they? I mean, when Gail first came into the show, she was working at the Mark Britton warehouse. Ivy was working there as well, but Ivy herself was quite a different character in her first appearance, wasn't she? For a while, she was a bit of a good time girl herself before they reinvented her a bit as the mother-in-law from hell. Because eventually, Gail and Brian, Ivy's son, start seeing each other. Ivy finds them canoodling on the sofa one time, and that kind of sets her up as the adversary that would be hanging over Gail throughout her marriage, her very first marriage.
She was just obsessed with Brian,
Ivy,
and she did not want Gail to marry him.
No, I mean, the very one of the first things that came between them was the whole Catholic versus Protestant split. I mean, Corrie had explored that briefly before with Harry and Hewitt and Concepta Riley when they got married, didn't they? But here you had Ivy, who was absolutely certain
Pope on the wall Catholic.
Yeah, she was saying you are gonna have a Catholic wedding, and the marrying a Protestant, I don't even like that. And Brian was like, well, he was definitely not a strong Catholic at all, was he? But Ivy wouldn't accept that he had strayed from the church, I suppose. But yeah,
might as well marry a man at this point if you're going to marry a Protestant. It should be illegal.
The mother-in-law, the evil mother-in-law trope is well done in fiction, but she was just the perfect embodiment of it. And I can't think of any other Coronation Street mother-in-law that has been quite such an irritant as Ivy was. Yeah. And definitely, like you said, a very sympathetic one as well. At times, depends on partly where your own religious persuasions lie, I suppose, or equally, are you a mother? Because everything she did, if you think, well, she did it because she loves Brian and she wants the best for him, a lot of it could be understandable. There are
definitely some women who would have watched Ivy and gone, yeah, my daughter-in-law's a nightmare as well. Because a lot of the time, this is a common conflict with mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws about parenting. The grandchildren, and this was made worse because Brian went to Qatar, didn't he? To work.
He was doing some work.
And so Gail was left alone, and then Ivy would come in and be like, "You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong. You shouldn't be doing this."
Gail wanted to go back to work at Jim's Cafe after having a couple of years off when Nick was born, or Nicky as he was back then, and Ivy didn't want to have any of that. She'd just have an opinion on absolutely everything that drove Gail up the wall.
Yep.
And things got worse after Brian died because, again, very understandably, Ivy was absolutely devastated by this.
Ruined
but
her life.
Her grief turned into an obsession with the memory of her dead son, and
she didn't want Gail to move on.
No. She refused. I mean, Gail did move on to Martin very quickly after Brian died, relatively speaking.
The marriage was on the rock. You know, lots of bad things happened in that marriage anyway, and obviously Ivy blamed Gail for all of that too.
Well, Brian had his affairs, didn't he? He strayed. And the fact that they married twice that's definitely Brian's fault.
Well, it's Gail's fault, really.
That's what Ivy would say.
Because she's not Catholic.
Not Catholic enough
already.
For her.
Well, Ivy then descends into alcoholism, doesn't she? And she can't see her grandchildren because Gail won't let her. And
I love the story where Ivy
manipulates Nick.
I love the story where Ivy starts going to the spiritualist church and thinking that she's communicating with Brian, or that she would be able to communicate with him, and she wouldn't hear. You know, but I think by this time she was going out with or married to, I can't remember, Don as well, and he was being driven crazy by her obsessive.
Well, literally went insane.
Yeah.
She's driven people to madness. This woman.
Yeah, but like you said, she ended up turning to alcohol, and there were some, again, like with David and Gail, there were some really lovely kind of family bondy scenes as well, and often when characters are at each other's throats, that makes those tender scenes all the more special.
Well, I mean, Lynn Perry's performance when Ivy finds out that Brian has died was incredible.
Incredible, yeah, for sure.
And also she was very manipulative because she's the reason why Nick is called Nick Tilsley and not Nick Platt.
Yeah, if anyone wondered. Yeah, even in death, Ivy continued to.
She wins.
Have her,
she's won.
She did because she unfortunately had to make a quite hasty exit from Coronation Street. Did Lynn, didn't she? And then a few years later
actually.
that she was killed off screen. But she said in her will that Nick had to change his name from Nick Platt to Nick Tilsley again in order to inherit the house. And
he did.
Ivy was. She was very obsessed with Nick as well for a spell, wasn't she? And she would get him in. She was trying to get him into the church and be more like
boy. And
yeah. I think she got him onto the football team in the church.
I mean, she's replaced Brian with Nick because you know she seemed like the sort of woman who was obsessed with sons. And Sarah Lou's not interesting to her particularly. It's Nick that she wanted because Nick reminded her, or he was a new Brian.
Yeah. I mean, family was very, very important to her. It was great relationship, those two. It's so sad that it had to come to an end with Lynn Perry leaving when it did, because she could have gone on for a little bit longer.
In a different world.
Yeah, and many people would say that Gail has become like Ivy now, because I think Nick is Gail's golden boy. She's mega interfering in his life. We'll obviously talk more about Nick later. Guess which letter that will be. But she's even said,
it's S for squint.
Helen has said in interviews, I think it was when she was talking about scenes that she would film with Leanne, or might have been Kylie, I can't remember. She's like saying, this is literally the same, in a good way. This is very similar to what it was between Gail and Ivy 10, 15 years ago, except now I'm in Ivy's shoes. So she's recognised that she has become the person, the character has become the person she hated the most. And
I don't think Gail ever quite reached the heights that
she didn't.
Ivy
quite
was
get
incredibly self-obsessed. Like she didn't see anyone's perspective apart from her own. Whereas I think Gail's got a bit more.
Maybe a little
ability
bit more
to see beyond her
but
own nose.
She's certainly a bit of a meddler.
Yeah.
Is Gail. She doesn't get anything better to do than meddle in the affairs of her children. Right, let's move on to J. J stands for jobs, and let's have a quick rundown of some of what Gail has been getting up to in the street. When you think about Gail's employment, and you know, what job would you say that she's most remembered for? What would it be for you?
Probably remember being a receptionist at the medical centre, because those were the scenes.
That's kind of your era, isn't it?
But also, I guess so. In recent times, that's been the only time her job has actually really given her a plot. The rest of the time, it's just like, where should we put Gail?
Yeah, 'cause she's been a cleaner for quite a bit over the last few years, hasn't she? She was cleaner at the bistro for a fair bit of the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, just because, Nick's often been the one in charge there. She was a cleaner in Underworld. I don't even remember whether that job finished technically, but it's just another symptom of Gail not appearing on screen much.
Well, should we go through chronologically?
Well, no, I don't mind. We can talk about what do you remember most about the medical center? You said that
getting fired.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to talk about it chronologically is because she did build up. She started off a secretary at the Mark Britton warehouse in 74 to 75. Then she was a corner shop assistant in 76. Then for 2 episodes, she was a barmaid in the Rovers.
I always forget that happens.
Makes her one of a very small number of people on the show.
In the recent Gail compilation that was uploaded to the Coronation Street YouTube channel just last week, they had a little clip of her recently talking to Audrey and saying, I worked behind the bar once, and then they showed a clip of her making a snowball for Bet. And the story there was that Annie, I think, couldn't afford to keep on Bet and Betty, so she wanted to.
Expensive women.
They were both quite expensive to keep, so she ended up getting rid of those and then replacing them with Gail. And then it turned out that Gail was a bit useless, as you can imagine. And then Bet ends up coming back to the pub again. But yeah, it's nice that she's had it's a bit of an exclusive group, although it's I don't know how many barmaids has the Rovers had now. It's past 50, isn't it? It might even be past 100, I don't know. But yeah, the fact that Gail is on there is good.
It's a special job. She was the Western Front manager, which is a clothes shop, for a couple of years.
Yeah, that was adjoining shop. Yeah, it was adjoining to the factory, wasn't it? That was for Mike.
And then probably the longest stretch was 79 to 2000 when she was at Dawson's Cafe, which was also Jim's Cafe and Roy's Rolls. She's a waitress and then co-owner.
Names, yeah.
And so that really, I think,
that's her main job.
Gail becoming growing professionally, right? Then in 2000 until 2010, she gets a job as a receptionist at the medical centre, which is when I watched it. And then she had a great downfall, and she's never ever had such an important job as being a co-owner or a receptionist at the doctor's surgery since.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that Gail had a bit of business nous to her, and she was the owner of any kind of business, but her and Alma ran that very successfully together for a number of years. Because they never
had to order any olives.
We'll come to that later. So yeah, Alma was in charge of the factory, the cafe at the beginning, because it was Jim's Cafe, it was called, named after Alma's husband, Jim, who I think never made an appearance on screen. But Gail eventually buys into it. And they, like we talked about Alma already, and they had this brilliant partnership. Those two have got lovely chemistry. On the 40th anniversary episode, the Gail and Me one that they did, they had Amanda Barry coming into the cafe set with Helen Worth sitting there and having a little reunion, which was lovely. But yeah, they had some great moments working behind the counter there, and like with Phyllis Pierce as another waitress, and all of her chasings after Percy and everything. They had some great moments. But I think when I think of Gail, I just struggle to think of her. I don't struggle to think of her. I just don't think of her as working. I think of her as being a mother more than someone who's got a job. Do you know?
It's because she hasn't done any obvious jobbing since 2010. Like all the other stuff, being waitress and cleaner, she's been at the bistro, then Underworld, then the bistro again. You never see her doing it though.
I think
she wanders in every so often and makes a joke about bottoming and then goes away again.
I think when you're working behind the counter at a cafe as well, that doesn't necessarily lead itself to any big stories or hugely memorable moments. I mean, I don't want to, Roy's the exception here, I suppose, but you get lots of scenes standing in the background and passing cups of coffee to people, and that's almost the extent of it, isn't it?
Well, it's also, since the medical centre, it's like she's retired and she was just dabbling, really, because she's working as a cleaner part-time at all of these places. Bloody hard work. I was a part-time cleaner. So I know it's not dossing around like a lot of people think it is, but she didn't seem to do anything actually that we watched her doing, and she certainly wasn't pulling in a lot of money. I can tell you that from experience as well.
But you said that the medical centre, there were the odd story here and there that stood out to you,
Well,
particularly when she does the bit of negligence, a bit of what would now be a GDPR breach. But that's
why she gets fired, isn't it?
This was Gail being a full-on mum to Nick again.
Well, she's looking stuff up.
Well, she's investigating Natasha, who's Nick's going out with at the time, or had been. And then Natasha said she'd had an abortion, and Gail wanted to find out a little bit more detail about it and whether she actually had. And then, she gets caught having a bit of a tinker where she shouldn't be tinkering in the records, and that's the end of that. But I don't remember her too much working at the medical centre, because there weren't very many medical centre scenes. That set has had its ups and its downs, and it's been
a shame they got rid of that set, because they love medical stuff. Why couldn't they have kept the medical centre receptionist? Because we had Moira, we had Liz, and that lot working in there. It's another way to give a character a job that isn't buttering balms or giving people beer.
Medical centre is seriously underused now. It's because most of the medical dramas that happen on the street these days
hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Serious. It's too serious for just a local medical centre.
But when Gail was working at the receptionist, I think that was professional Gail, wasn't it? She's never been...
Gail in a suit. I mean, it was Gail in a tabard in the 80s and 90s, wasn't it?
I mean, honestly, nowadays, if they were going to give Gail a story that she looked up some medical records on a computer, they'd have a go, what? How do you click? What's a mouse? I've never heard of it before. Yeah. Whereas, no, she was switched on. She was
proficient enough to be able to do a bit of sneaking around on the computer those days. So, I think that most people, when they would think about Gail's professional career, they'd say, cafe shop owner was the biggest one.
Yeah, it's the longest by a lot.
Yeah. But, her time at the medical centre was not to be sniffed at either.
No, she's 10 years there.
Okay, let's move on.
The next letter in the alphabet, if you're paying attention, is K.
K.
And who's that?
Not Kylie. I haven't got... Maybe it should have been Kylie, I've just realised. But we spoke a little bit about her earlier. Who are we we're talking about? Kelly.
Lorraine
Kelly.
This was this was just hilarious. It's got to be mentioned when you talk about Gail, because this happened in May 2019. This is when the Platts all go on their special trip and it all goes traumatic.
This is in the wake of David and Nick stealing Audrey's money, but getting all the Platts together. There's that lovely photo of them, isn't there, sitting on a bench. That was fantastic couple of episodes. But I don't know, was it spoiled by the inclusion of Lorraine Kelly, or was it made more hilarious? I think mileage may vary there. I don't remember there being another high-profile celebrity cameo since. Did she ruin it for everybody?
But there was a pedalo chase. It wasn't actually Gail.
Gail finds out that Lorraine. She hears a rumor that Lorraine is staying at the campsite, and she thinks she sees them. So she thinks she sees Lorraine out on the lake. So she hops in a pedalo herself, and they go after her. But it turns out that
wasn't Lorraine Kelly.
Not Lorraine Kelly. There, she's actually on the side, but she does turn up later in the archery scene
because Gail accidentally shoots her. We always insist it's in the bum, but it wasn't. It was in the thigh.
Yes.
And she comes out of the tent that she's standing in and calls Gail
a daft wee woman.
There we go.
Did you, looking back on that, do you mind it? Is it a bit too silly? Is it Corrie gone too far?
I thought it was funny. I mean, yeah, it was silly. I don't mind it at all. I thought it was funny. Lorraine Kelly liked it. She posted about it on Instagram earlier in the year and said, 5 years ago I made a very silly cameo in Corrie when Gail shot me in the leg with an arrow. I was more wooden than the vast forests of northern Russia, but what larks.
I don't think that having celebrities playing themselves on Coronation Street is something that should happen too often. I think I can't remember whether Lorraine's been on it since. I remember that Gemma went on. Was it Gemma and Rosie went on This Morning or something like that on the show as well? I think that was just before Rosie's exit story, and I can't remember whether Lorraine was there or whether it was somebody else. But you do have to be very careful with actual celebrity cameos, don't you? If you want to, not that.
Well, the thing is, usually if they're going to use a celebrity, they'll have them play a character.
Yeah.
But
in real life, us mere mortals don't interact with actual celebrities quite
we certainly can't
so
afford
often
to go to holiday camps where celebrities go.
Where they go to hang out. No. But this is a modern iconic Gail moment, I suppose. In a decade that didn't have a whole lot of Gail in there, that's certainly something that's become clip show worthy.
Yeah, definitely.
In amongst all the other kind of early 2000s or 90s moments that end up showing up more often.
Speaking of clip moments,
yes,
our next letter
L
is for Lewis Archer, and he definitely provided a very good clip.
I think it's quite a nice segue saying, speaking of archers,
talking
there is Archer.
If only
He
he'd
didn't shoot
given
anyone
Gail
in the
some
bum.
tips. So he first appeared, like I said, when was it?
15 years ago he made his first appearance on Coronation
Claudia
Street. Yeah.
as her boyfriend, because he was a gigolo.
Male escort, if
And
you please.
he was dating Audrey for a while. And then he went through all the women, didn't he? He conned her, kissed Deirdre. This is when there was the Manchester tart scene.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah, the Manchester, because that was Gail that threw the Manchester tart, wasn't it? He'd been conning Audrey out of a load of money, and then I think that wasn't he caught on CCTV in the bookies kissing Deirdre, and that all came out at a party, and Gail ended up throwing him the Manchester tart in Deirdre's face. Another iconic Gail fighty moment. But yeah, he ends up actually dating Gail when he comes back, because Lewis was a character that would make sporadic appearances, have a story, and then disappear off for a few years.
Yeah,
which is one of the reasons why I'm really gutted that they've killed him off. I don't think it was worth it. I know it led into that story that we were just talking about in 2019 with Gail's money. I know that was Archie that was killed off there, wasn't it? Or maybe it was all combined in it, I can't remember. But yeah, Lewis was this brilliant recurring character played by the ever so suave and lovely Nigel Havers. But yeah, his final story... Well, no, not his final. His before a very lengthy absence was dating Gail in revenge and basically just trying to get his own back on her, wasn't he?
Well, he pretended to be his twin brother at one point as well.
Oh yeah, that was before then. Yeah, when that was the moment when Gail and Audrey were power walking through the... Gail liked to power walk, didn't she? I think we've seen her doing it with Sally down the cobbles sometimes as well, down the pavement.
I think it's because Helen Worth does a really great power walk. She really works those elbows.
But yeah, anyway, so Gail... When Richard comes back, she's still suspicious of him and thinking that he's trying to pull the wool over Audrey's eyes again. So she teams up with Gloria Price, I think it was, to try to tempt him away from Audrey and see if he'll go off with Gloria. And he doesn't, but it's enough to drive a wedge between him and Audrey. And then in retaliation, he decides to start dating Gail to try and trick her and try and con her out of a load of money, which was brilliant.
Yeah, so he tells them, and I mean, I can't believe that she's agreed to move to France with Jesse, because she's seen this happen before and it didn't go very well.
A man coming to whisk her away abroad.
Lewis said he was going to take her to Italy, and so he has to get her bank details and basically just steals all the money, but not before creating a hilarious DVD, which was it was supposed to be Italian for Lovers.
Well, he just hid the DVD inside the Italian
and then when she put it in,
it,
and the whole Platt family were watching this video of Lewis Archer making the perfect peach Bellini, and telling Gail that he's got one over on her, and basically telling all the Platts what he thought of them, including David calling him a weasel face. Yeah,
saying that Kylie was all right.
Yeah,
she's too good for them.
Yeah, and telling Audrey that he still loved her, which I thought was and Audrey's just like,
Lewis was such a brilliant character, because although he was villainous, he was an absolutely love to hate kind of villain.
He was so goddamn charismatic.
But yeah, similar to the when Sir Ian McKellen was in the show, and he was a very charming villain there, wasn't he? And you just couldn't help but go along with it. And again, like we were saying earlier when we were talking about the Eileen feud, Gail is a kind of character who is very, very easy to make fun of and trick, and you kind of
feel bad about
as much as we love her, we kind of enjoy seeing people making fun of her, I suppose. But yeah, that was such an amazing moment when Gail's watching the DVD with the rest of the family, and she realises that she's been conned.
And all of her money from
her money's gone. Yeah, jobs. And then at the end of the episode, that's when Audrey goes home and finds a little bunch of flowers that Lewis has left outside her house. That's such a great episode. That was a brilliant exit.
Yeah.
And if that had been his final appearance, maybe that would have been better, because he came back later, a few years later, didn't he? And he was
working with fake medium Rosemary.
Yes, she was played by Sophie Thompson, is it? Yeah. Is that the actress name?
She was in the play with Charlie DeMello.
She was, wasn't she? That's it. Yeah, she comes in and she's
Emma Thompson's sister.
She's a fake medium, and she's trying to convince Gail that this for the past 20 odd years she's been cursed by Richard Hillman, and he's like been haunting her, and that's why everything's gone wrong with her family. And it's funny because it's a little bit meta, really, because he has been, like we said, the catalyst for so many dramas that have gone on under the roof of Number 8 since he drove into that canal, and they kind of turned that into a plot point, didn't they? And had Gail really believing that maybe she was being haunted, which was, I'm gonna say, a little bit out of character. I don't think that Gail really would be taken in by all of that kind of thing.
You don't think she'd believe in a ghost, even if she gets visited by one?
Okay. Well, now that we know the truth,
we've moved
on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that really sat completely right with me. But at the end of the day, it was all a fake, wasn't it? It was all a charade, and Lewis was pulling the strings there again, trying to get back at Gail once again. But then he comes back into Audrey's life and then dies. And I just think that maybe his first big exit with the video would have been a better exit than what he ended up getting, which was just being found dead on a hotel room floor. Yeah,
it's sad because it is a kind of interesting dynamic. It shows the interesting dynamic between Audrey and Gail, because even though Gail had all her money stolen by Lewis, Audrey still viewed him as like the love of her life after Archie.
Yeah. You're right. It was almost like a Alf. Yeah. Well, Archie was up there as well, probably in her top 3.
Yeah. But yeah, so she didn't
care. She
kind
of was like, you brought it on yourself, Gail, really.
Yeah, she blamed Gail too for Lewis dying because Gail kind of convinced Audrey to not take him seriously when he was saying he was worried about his health.
Yeah.
And really, it was because of Gail. It was because of the revenge. Well, it was the revenge that Lewis took on Gail that they didn't get to spend time with each other. That they could have really, when they first started dating, they could have stayed together all those years and been happy, because she really did love him and he loved her. Yeah. But bloody Gail got in the way, didn't she?
It is interesting that you had somebody dating the mother and the daughter, and that's certainly a rare thing.
Yeah.
On Coronation Street.
It helps the age gap is only 7 years in real life, so it's not too
well,
strange.
I think that Lewis was supposed to be like 7 or 8 years older than Gail, which would then make him maybe 10, 11 or so years younger than Audrey. And
in the show.
In the show, that is. Yeah, exactly. So it kind of just about worked. And the strange relationship that those two have sometimes had over the years, that was a great way to test it and see whether blood was indeed thicker than water. Next up, we're on to M, which stands for McIntyre. Joe McIntyre, who I'm gonna say is probably Gail's most or least memorable husband.
Which is a shame, because he did have a very dramatic storyline, didn't he?
He did, but he was kind of in and out within a few years.
There was a lot of stuff that went on. I think they fit quite a lot into this 2 years, because their relationship was secret, because David and Tina, David's obviously Gail's son and Tina was Joe's daughter, they were dating, and so they didn't want them to find out, the parents, that they were also dating, so they had a secret relationship.
That was quite fun.
But he spiralled into
he had debts, he had medical he was addicted to painkillers, wasn't he?
And he tried his best, really, but he struggled at every turn, and he made so many bad decisions, like breaking into the medical centre,
that was to try and get the pills.
He also bought Gale Force, which is everyone's most hilarious favourite name for a boat in Coronation Street history, because there's not been very many boats, and you can't really count
but it's not the only boat that's been on the cobbles, if we count Peter's one as well.
And also the one that was in the garden.
Oh yeah, Des's boat.
There have been 3, at least. So
quite a large number for a landlocked soap, really, I suppose.
Yeah. And there weren't canal boats, any of them. Weird. No, yeah. But then there's Martha's barge.
Yeah,
Martha's barge.
That's true. But that didn't get its way to the cobbles.
No, it didn't. So Gale Force was the cause of his death, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He gets hit on the head by a boom.
Well, they'd gone out to Lake Windermere to try and his crackpot theory was because he was owing money to Rick Neelan, the loan shark. I was always surprised
Yes,
how early
he was-
Rick Neelan becomes a character, considering
I know,
he
me
made
too.
a bit of a splash.
I remember
a few
he
years
was
ago
at the
with
Soap
Gary.
Awards one year, and we were like, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, "He's been in the show for years, you donkeys."
Yeah. So anyway, Joe owed him a load of money, so he thinks the only way to get out of this is to fake his own death by going off to Lake Windermere and pretending to fall into the sea. Unfortunately for him, Gail didn't go along with this idea. Told him, "Don't be so ridiculous." He says, "No, I'm doing it." Sails out into the water, and when he's in there, hits a bit of a bad weather, gets hit around the bonds by the boom, and he goes, and then washes up on the shore a few days later.
Whoops.
So Gail's second husband's to meet a watery end, but this one was definitely... Oh no, I suppose they were both self-inflicted in a way, weren't they?
Yeah, so you've got so she started off with Brian, who was murdered. Are we going to go through husbands?
Well, we're
just going through them individually.
Yeah, well, I made my little rhyme, didn't I?
Yeah.
The way to remember Gail's husbands are stabbed, divorced, drowned, fell off boat, heart attack, still around.
Right.
And there's one to help you remember that.
That's Brian, who got stabbed.
Yeah.
And then you've got
Martin
who
divorced.
got divorced.
Yeah, drowned is Richard Hillman, although
Hillman
that does also...
drove into a canal himself.
Yeah.
And then we've got...
And you got Joe
fell
off boat
and died. Then we've got
Michael Rodwell,
who had a heart attack. And then we've got Jesse, who's still there. So
yeah, exactly.
Do the Rome again?
Stabbed, divorced, drowned, fell off boat, heart attack, still around.
Yeah.
There you go. I don't think that Joe stands the test of time as a memorable husband. But you're right. When the story went on, it was gripping stuff. And the scene where he does break into the medical centre, and Rhys Dinsdale did an amazing job there, and obviously that then led into the story, which again we'll talk more about later, where Gail ends up in prison because she's suspected of killing him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Michael Rodwell gets a lot of rap for being a bit of a pathetic husband, but he's certainly vying for that top spot with Joe, who just didn't quite make the same impression on me. But hey, there's got to be, if you're going to have 6 husbands, at least one of them's got to be a bit of a dud, hasn't he? Although maybe people might say the same about Jess.
I don't think she only had a couple of good ones, in my opinion. Right.
I think that maybe Joe could have been good for her. He just if he hadn't.
He's not my least favourite.
Oh, I know. If he hadn't had these medical dependencies and financial woes, then maybe it could have worked out. But hey, there's Joe McIntyre. Let's go on to N. And we did sneak preview this earlier, but N, of course, stands for Nick, the golden child of the Platt family. What would you say is how would you describe the relationship between Gail and precious Nicky?
Oh, she loved him very much, didn't she? I think definitely he's the favourite.
He certainly seems to have been the one that's caused the less drama. All 3 Platt children have had their fair share of upset that's been caused, but is he the most stable one?
Well, he's the one who's mostly had personal dramas rather than, criminal ones or teenage pregnancy. I mean, Sarah was very untroublesome as a child, to be honest with you, but the big problem was the teen pregnancy.
Yes.
But Nick, he did steal all that money from Audrey, caused a lot of ruckus.
I think that Gail is
trouble with women.
I think there is definitely a case of the first child syndrome, and that's the son of the first husband who met a tragic end, and he was the golden boy for quite a while, and he's also, I think, the fact that he is maybe the most successful. He's been abroad. He's had his own business. He's the one that you could trust.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got his professional life sorted out. When it comes to Sarah, I don't think she actually knows what she's doing, even though she's still not really given me any reason to think that. I just think she's stupid. And then you've got David, who just works at the family business. He hasn't really got. I mean, he
had trim up north for a bit.
Yeah, it didn't go well though, did it? So Nick's really, I mean, apart from having fires and bistro ninjas every now and then, he's been the most stable. But he's been very mothered, hasn't he? Some might say smothered.
Yeah,
he ran away as a kid.
Yeah, well, he was stolen by Brian at one point, or was it Martin? I can't remember. One of them stole him away to a service station. But yeah, he ran away himself. He was a bit of a troubled teen for a little bit, ever so slightly.
I think you have to be if you're a soap kid.
I think that he kind of rebelled against the idea that Martin was fathering him when he's, you're not my real dad kind of syndrome. But really, that pales in comparison to anything that David got up to. So when you're going to compare the two of them and which one's the easiest one to mother, then Nick wins every time. But yeah, he went off. He went to Canada for a bit, came back with a new head. He's had 3 heads, hasn't he? Gail loves them all equally, I'm sure. I remember the scene where, I think it was at Don Brennan's funeral, Nick shows up and this is the first appearance as Adam Rickett, and he's running down the path at the church, and
this is
Gail,
his hair flapping.
Probably was, the curtains flapping in the breeze, and Gail runs up and throws her arms around him because, yeah, he's just so, I think he's like a couldn't do wrong in her eyes. And then Leanne Battersby came along, and that certainly put a strain and tested out that theory.
She did not like them together.
Well, this is where Gail was very much like Ivy, because everything that Ivy didn't agree with Brian dating Gail for the longest of time, and then Leanne was the embodiment, the antithesis of anything that she would have wanted her darling Nick to have gone out with. She was a slapper, a chav, a scrubber. You call her all names. That's what Gail said.
I mean, the thing about Leanne that's easy to forget these days is that she was, a hellraiser.
She had a rough upbringing.
She was a big chav.
Yeah.
Bad family, worst family on the street.
Yeah, bad stock for sure.
And her precious Nicky, the choir boy, was going to run off and get married to this.
He was
dirty
only a choir
scrubber.
boy for a little bit, to be fair. Well, yeah, when it was such a brilliant scene because they go off and get married. They run off to Gretna Green, don't they, Nick and Leanne? And when they come back, the revelation to Gail and Leanne just is smirking her way through it when she reveals that
she's the latest Mrs. Platt.
Exactly.
Mrs. Tilsley.
That certainly put a strain on Gail and Nick's relationship. But over the years, they've just been. Fair. He's been relatively hassle-free, I would say. But it didn't stop her trying to interfere with him. I think since he's been Ben Price Nick, he's been a lot more stable. He was still a bit of a dippy teenage heartthrob throughout his Adam Rickett years, wasn't he? Like there was one time when he got a job in London, and Gail ends up interfering and calling up the company and saying, he doesn't want it anymore because she didn't want him to leave. She just refused to cut those apron strings once he came back.
Gail.
But yeah, I think that in his latest guise, he's certainly settled down a lot more.
I think Gail knows not to mess with him, and he doesn't really need her help. The other two do a bit more, so she's more focused on. Especially with David, because he's the youngest.
Yeah. I think also the fact that he doesn't live at number 8.
He doesn't even live on Coronation Street.
No. I mean, I know Sarah doesn't live there anymore either, but she certainly has done for a long time.
Yeah.
And if your kids are going to live with the parents, there is naturally going to be, the parent-child relationship is going to carry on feeling like that for a bit longer. But yeah, if he's been Mr. Businessman at the bistro and living in fancy flats in Victoria Courts, you can afford to sort of eventually cut those apron strings. So yeah, no, I think that Nick's going to be fine without Gail. They've had some lovely scenes together, but where I'm kind of really interested to see how David gets on without. It's basically without somebody to throw peanuts at.
Yeah, you'll have to fight with Nick again.
I think Nick's going to do just fine. Let's move on to O. And we mentioned this one earlier. O is for olives. Gemma, tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, this was just, Dippy Gail, even though it wasn't really her fault.
This is...
This was when she was working at the bistro, and she's supposed to be ordering jars of olives, and they're pretty big jars already, aren't they? Massive jars of olives for catering size.
Well, I think that she was the cleaner, but I think she was trying to help out Nick by ordering them.
Yeah, and so Lewis tampers with the order and changes it from 5 to 500.
This was part of his revenge scheme on Gail.
Yeah, that shows her. So they end up with 500 jars of olives, and they still mention every now and then that they've got this massive backlog of olives.
Well, this is why I kind of thought it deserved an alphabetical entry of its own, because it became a bit of a running joke on Coronation Street for a good few years. Every now and then they'd open up the cupboard and there'd be a jar of olives there, or they'd be doing like a special in the bistro, like it comes with extra olives. All because of this silly scene, and it's become one of the Gail memes, hasn't it?
It's funny. I think it's funny and great. Yeah. And there's a bit where she pretends that she likes olives.
Yeah, there's a famous scene that's set inside number 8, and she's there saying to Kylie, I think, "Oh, do you want an olive?" And she's like, "No," and they're horrible. And Gail says, "Oh, I like olives," and then she takes an olive out of the jar and bites into it. Just pulls the weirdest of faces. It looks like it's supposed to be, "Oh, I don't really like these, but I'm pretending to like them." But that image of Gail biting onto an olive has become probably one of the most spread pictures of Gail all across the internet, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of like Hilda Ogden, where she wanted to project this air of sophistication. Yeah. And I think like olives are one of those things that people think are fancy. Not so much anymore, but like, you know, even like 10 years ago, olives were quite exotic, and having olives on your pizza was weird, and so to like an olive was, you know, a bit of a hurdle.
Yeah, but I do love Gail and her olives.
You don't like olives,
I don't like olives, no. I certainly wouldn't want to have 500 jars of the things. I don't have a lot more to say about O for olives. So
I like olives, in case anyone wondered. So you can send me...
wants to send Gemma
5 jars would be nice.
5 would be sufficient, would it?
I'd get through those. I do love an olive.
P is for Platt. We are naming, if you hadn't noticed this already, the husbands by their surnames, just because it worked out that way, the best. So this is Martin Platt, who so named the dynasty because they are Team Platt, aren't they? They're the Platt family, despite the fact that
Platt Chat without Martin Platt.
Yeah, I mean,
and he's not even in it
these days. You got Gail, who's most recently been Gail Rodwell, but obviously Gail Chadwick. Now she's married to Jesse. You got Audrey Roberts. You got Nick Tilsley. Is Sarah Platt at the moment, or is she still Barlow? I don't remember. Point. You got Max Turner. So. You got all these different surnames. There's only actually a few Platts, but we still see them as the Platt family, and it all comes down to the progenitor Martin.
It's only David,
and Shona,
Lily, and Shona.
Yeah.
Who are Platts?
I think it's Harry a Platt. I think he is.
Oh, he's Harry Platt, yeah, isn't he?
Yeah,
because it's Harry Platt. Sounds funny. Right, so he was. He's 10 years younger than.
Well, this was
Gail.
Quite the scandal when the two of them first started seeing each other, and Ivy did not like that.
No, they get together not long after, as you say, Brian dies.
Yeah,
and they had to. It's a baptism of fire, really, for Martin having to cope with Ivy.
Yeah,
I mean, he must have really loved Gail. I don't know why. I never really saw them as happy together.
I don't remember. I think Martin just put up with Ivy, and I think he wasn't too scared to kind of bite back because he didn't have the long-standing familial link that Gail did with her.
Well, he's not afraid to tell people where to go.
Yeah.
Martin, to me, is like a grumpy old chihuahua. Like, he hates everybody and he's always barking at something.
You've got a really skewed view of Martin, and he certainly had his fair share of...
I've never seen him do anything
being a bit
nice.
of an arse.
He's always shouting about something. Like, any scene he was in... If something happened he didn't like, he'd just go straight to shouting. Often. But I think back in the early days, when he was this young thing that Gail had on her arm, he was a lot more fun. I think it was a bit more laid back. Yeah, exactly. You've not seen that era. And I think he was a great dad to David as well at the beginning. I kind of like how much of an arsehole he always was, and how he always shouts. It always makes me laugh when I watch a scene, because usually if I'm watching a Martin scene, it's from a clip show or for a purpose. Like, we're watching an old episode for a particular reason, and it just makes me laugh because he will just be in a scene and then just start shouting for no reason, and I just think that is just Martin, isn't it? I love it when he does that. It's a bit of a shouty and sometimes a bit sarcastic as well. I think maybe that's where David got his sarcastic streak from. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you want something to have a moan about when we're talking about Martin,
he wasn't faithful to Gail.
Okay,
I
right.
think that they are an iconic couple. I think there's no denying that if you think about classic Corrie couples, people will mention Gail and Martin. But yeah, it was all down to him when it all came crumbling down.
Is Martin Platt Gail's worst husband? Yes.
No.
Yes.
He's not.
Right, so Brian cheated on her, didn't he? But Martin cheated on her more.
I
Richard,
don't know.
did he? No?
I think that Brian was
Joe
a bit
didn't.
more of a player.
Michael
went off with Eileen.
Michael went off with Eileen.
Yeah.
Jesse's not had a chance. But Martin cheated on her with a couple of people.
Well, yeah, but he had a one-night stand with a nurse in 1994. This was a great little scene because he was having a snog with her at the hospital and Alf happened to be walking past. I think he was doing some mayoral duty at the hospital. But Gail ends up forgiving Martin about this. But the main thing that caused the end of the Platt relationship was when he started dating Rebecca Hopkins in 2000, who was I think she was another nurse at the hospital, played by Jill Halfpenny. And that really was the end of it. And I think Martin had just got fed up with the family dramas because this was all around the same time that Sarah was getting pregnant. David was becoming a bit more of a cheeky scamp. Now he's got his new Jack P. Shepherd-shaped head.
That's his kid. It's the one he's got to actually pay attention to.
Yeah, he was finding that married life was just a little bit of a drudge. I'm not condoning what he's done, and I think that
if you get bored, just have
definitely deserved to be the end of the marriage when that happened. And I don't remember being too upset that had happened because I didn't hate him at the time, but I did find him a little bit on the dull side. And this came from an era when it was wall-to-wall icons in my mind in the mid to late 90s, and I always still found that if I was going to rank my characters then in terms of interest, Martin would be more down the bottom. I can't really remember.
He is iconic, and I think he's the only surviving man who was married to Gail who isn't Jesse.
Yeah, exactly. He's just I can't really picture many famous Martin and Gail kind of clip show moments.
No.
But they were married for like 10 years or so.
I'm not in a position to comment on it really.
I think the fact that he was the husband while she was going through her young mum phase and maybe wasn't on screen quite so long and didn't have the biggest of storylines. This is what happens often when characters become mums on Coronation Street. They don't have those big stories, and the fact that Martin was alongside her then meant that he also didn't have a huge amount to do.
Didn't work on the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a bit of a death knell. There's lots of characters. Unless you're going to be like a Lisa Swain and just have them build you a permanent set that you can do your policing from. Yeah.
Now, obviously, Martin was due to come back this year, and Corrie's original plan for Gail's exit was to have Martin return. We don't know. We honestly don't know. We
how it's different.
We haven't actually asked anybody who might be able to tell us, but. I keep meaning to do that.
I kind of want to know, but I also like not knowing.
I really want to know, but I can only imagine that what they've had play out with Jesse would have been incredibly similar with what they did with Martin, with, it turning out that Gail had been seeing him off screen for a bit. He comes in, sweeps her away.
I can definitely...
Audrey saying, I can't believe you're going back to him. He treated you so badly. The only thing that maybe would feel a little bit like it wouldn't fit would be what Jesse keeping the money thing secret from David, but maybe he would. I don't know.
For David,
yeah. I just don't think that it would have been a satisfying ending for me.
I wouldn't have liked him to come back and take Gail away. Number one, because he's got another family that he would have had to have abandoned.
Yeah, because
in New Zealand.
He lived in.
New Zealand.
he was in Liverpool for a bit, wasn't he? And then emigrated to the other side of the world.
With this woman.
Yeah.
So he would have had to have ditched them and gone, unless that's something horrible. It's a soap you can just kill people.
Wow, we all know what happens to people who move to Australia and Coronation Street. Just ask David Barlow.
Yeah, a different country, but very close together as far as we're concerned. So. From that perspective, I wouldn't have liked him to come back, and also because I didn't like him, and he cheated on her, and I cannot. You'd have to really suspend disbelief to believe that this guy who's proven himself to be a cheater would have kept it, faithful to Gail in their final years. I just didn't like them together.
But I think
They would have written it so you would have been like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I think they would. But equally, I think that lots of fans seem to really be going for the idea. And people haven't warmed to the Jesse marrying Gail quite so much. And people have said, oh, it would have been perfect if Martin and Gail had gone together. No. Maybe they don't have such strong feeling about Martin as you do. Or maybe their feeling is, let's forget the bad.
Well, I think...
He was the, you know, in their minds, the original husband, even though he obviously was number 2.
Well, you know, just because he was in it for a while when they were married, there's loads of people that were. Oh, no, I'm not going to talk about them anymore.
Okay, well, let's go on to Q then. And we're starting to reach some of the more difficult letters, and you just wait till we get to the end of the alphabet because we're really stretching the boundaries here.
Q is what the hell is going on?
Q is for quotes. So let's run through a few of these. Have you got any famous or favourite Gail quotes from over the years that you'd like to lay on me?
I like. I'm on pills, for God's sake. When she's confronting David about the cards that have been sent, pretending to be. That was
great. And that's been another... I mean, you don't get many widespread Coronation Street memes, do you? No. I think Charlie Lawson is still living on Corrie memes of Jim quotes, so he is. But this, I'm on pills, for God's sake, it felt like... It was such an innocuous throwaway line, but it's taken on a life of its own in recent years. I think it's become like a TikTok thing.
Really?
Yeah, because you're right. This was when David was being shouted at by Gail over the whole fake cards that he was sending her, pretending to be from Richard Hillman, and she's like, "Oh, do you believe what I've been going through?" And also, I think this is on the TikTok thing. It's been combined with the scene where she. Is at the drug support group with Kylie and Nick and David, and the drugs worker thinks that she's Kylie and she's the one that's on drugs because she's all done up all shabbily because she had to. Well,
that was the I'm not on drugs, she is.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But in the TikTok, they get merged together.
Do they?
The meme is I'm not on drugs, she is. I'm on pills, for God's sake.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. I YouTube it. We're not on TikTok, as you know.
I'm scared of TikTok. Are you guys not going to be nice to us?
But I did venture there earlier today just to see this. So yeah, having that I'm not on drugs, she is another great
probably
Gail line.
Her most famous line is "You're Norman Bates with a briefcase."
I don't think there'd be any denying that's number one.
That would be... You know, it was Gail that said it, but it always gets put on pictures of Richard Hillman.
I don't even know, like... It's iconic, but it didn't...
It gets away with being incredible. It's a really quite a naff, like, cheesy line, isn't it? It's like...
Yeah, in the pantheon of Corrie one-liners, yes, it was great, but there's been so many others. This one's just stuck, and I think it's partly because it's from that two-hander episode. It was the climax of one of Corrie's biggest storylines ever.
It's a really great line, right? But it doesn't make any sense, because Norman Bates was just creepy with his mum.
Yeah.
He wasn't... What would he have done with the briefcase?
He did do a bit of stabby in the shower, didn't he?
If you gave Norman Bates a briefcase, would he have turned out like Richard Hillman? I don't think so. It's just because he's a really... It's just an unexpected line, isn't it? But could you have... Yeah. I wonder whether when they were writing this line, whoever wrote this line, genius, were they sitting there going, right, who should I put in here? Who should I put... Who's a famous serial killer from... Who should I put? Dr. Lecter?
There's got to be one that doesn't usually carry a briefcase. I think that...
Who else could you have had? Like...
I'm not up on serial killers in the same way as you are. Freddy Krueger with a briefcase.
Freddy Krueger with a briefcase would have been quite a different image.
I think it's because Norman Bates was quite demure and calm.
Creepy.
And anyway, look...
I'm fascinated with coming up with different alternatives.
I think one of the reasons that
Dr.
line
Frankenstein with a briefcase.
I think one of the reasons that line went down in Corrie history is because it added to the dark comedy of that scene, and it was such a chilling, dark, somber episode where the revelation comes out, and she's just finding you know, revelation after revelation about what he's gone up to, and nobody in real life would probably would say that, with the fact that she did, and it kind of worked. I think that's what makes it iconic.
Could you also imagine her, like, when she said it, going, "Yes, Gail, yes, it's funny. Gail, you are funny."
If only this wasn't a two-hander and everyone was around to hear it.
She's like, "Oh God, I hope someone recorded that. That was great."
Well, the other one from that episode that I love was when he's saying it was an accident, and Gail fires back with, "How could it be an accident? You hit her over the head with a crowbar."
Excellent.
That was so good. Yeah, I love we alluded to it earlier when she's having that fight with Eileen. And then Jason comes walking down the road and she says, "Oh look, here comes the rest of the village people," or something like that. Not PC at all these days, but it was very funny at the time because Jason's there dressed as the builder, isn't he, coming down the road. That was a brilliant line, and again it was like a really heightened dramatic moment broken by this great
she's
image.
got some great I wouldn't say that anyone would call Gail a comedy character, even though they've kind of made her into a bit more of a funny person. Well, you'd laugh at her, really.
Yeah.
But she's had some great funny lines, like, and they're all quite clever, and you wouldn't think of Gail as being quite clever. Like, when Ivy says to her, "May God forgive you, Gail," and then Gail says, "Well, he might, but you never will."
Yes.
That was great. That was so, like, brilliant. On it. Well done, Gail.
That little back and forth there between Ivy and Gail perfectly encapsulated their relationship, and the fact that Gail knew that, you know, it was her way of saying, I cannot win, basically.
Yeah.
Like
you will hold a grudge for the rest of our lives. Yeah,
that was brilliant. I love that.
There's another good one where Eileen says, "Sarah's been through half the lads in Weatherfield," and Gail says, "And Todd's been through the other half."
I read somewhere online recently that in the ITV3 repeat of that episode, that Gail's comeback was taken out there.
Did she just go, "Shut up, Eileen"?
Obviously, promiscuity of Todd is not PC these days, but you can't censor conversation straight. So anyway,
we remember.
I don't know whether there's many other.
Well, the other one was like when they're being told that Sarah Lou's pregnant, and she says, "She's only 12 years old."
Oh yes,
that's a clip show.
I mean, I think that's the scene more than anything, But yeah, that moment where she's like, she's only 12 years old. Was she 13? I can't remember which one she was at the time. Maybe she was 13 at that point. That was a great moment. But because that scene gets shown again and again and again, I think that's one of the reasons why that particular line has gone down into Coronation Street legend. Let's move on.
You've got to have some famous lines. If you want to be an icon on Coronation Street, you've got to have a section in your alphabet where you can put your quotes, and she's certainly done that.
Yeah, but it's funny, like
I love olives.
You'd have thought that somebody who's been in the show for that long might accrue a longer list of classic lines, but maybe the longevity counts against you. I don't
think that Corrie characters have that. It's more to do with banter and talking in there's some great interactions and stuff and funny scenes and things, but not all of, and a lot of it also is in the delivery.
I think partly it's because there's so much of Coronation Street that everything that gets said is very fleeting, and you might at the moment of watching it go, "Oh, that was a funny thing that so-and-so just said," but
that hasn't caught people's
and it's just a few of them that have turned into the clip show moments, or have been put on a mug or a t-shirt, or
if you take
have you.
Someone like Evelyn, for example, like her lines, not always absolute zingers. It's the way she tells them, the way she speaks.
But I think she has had a lot of zingers. But I don't think for Evelyn, many, if any of them, have got into Corrie legend. Even though there were no.
I used to try to write quotes down as I found them funny, but I've not been keeping up with it.
Off the
what
ball
an idiot!
That, have you? Right, R stands for Rodwell. Another husband rolls around, and this was a character who. Definitely not one of the most iconic of Gail's husbands, but we've said enough times on the podcast already, we absolutely adored Michael Rodwell, didn't we?
Yeah, played by
Les Dennis of game show Family Fortune fame.
Poor guy had to work so hard to get this gig, to get people to take him seriously, and people still did not. And even, you know, when he's still quite active on social media, I think.
So, yeah.
But whenever he would post something about Corrie, there'd just be all these trolls in the comments going, "You're rubbish, I hate you, you're terrible." But I loved him. I thought he was great. I really loved Michael Rodwell. I think
like
Les
one of
Dennis
my
did
favourites.
such a great job.
If she
could have, really likeable guy.
If she could have settled down for good with anybody, then Michael would be it. And it's such a shame that he was. Well, it's a real shame that he was killed off.
For him to have come back and been the one. If any of her husbands were going to survive and take her to her final paradise resting place, then it should really have been Michael, because he genuinely cared about her. He's a nice bloke.
Gail was reaching a time of her life where she didn't need the drama anymore. She just needed somebody nice to have a bit of a snuggle with on the sofa. Yeah. Somebody who wasn't at all complex.
Get her an ice cream.
Yeah,
from your
van.
van.
He was an ice cream man, wasn't he? And this was him, because he obviously very memorable. He came into the show as a burglar, and he was robbing the Platts, wasn't he? And then gets chased out by David, was it?
This was like
Kylie, I don't remember.
An attempt at an issues storyline, wasn't it? Because we had two prongs of it. Because number one, it was to do with, was it the credit crunch, where, you know, people were losing their homes. He'd fallen
on hard times in the recession.
He was homeless because of the recession, and his family had left him, and so he decided to turn his hand to burglary, and he did one and got caught immediately. But also, the second one was the restorative justice thing, which I'd not really heard of before.
No, I hadn't either.
So this was where he was,
he was in prison, wasn't he, when Gail goes to visit him?
Was that he had to meet his victim.
I don't think it was punishment, but...
All right, what did you call it then?
Rehabilitation.
Yeah, but half the time the person's going to turn up and go, you're a bastard. I'm glad you're in prison.
Well,
Gail wouldn't show up and go, I'm so sorry that you seem so middle class. I couldn't believe a middle class person.
It was such a lovely scene.
Usually it's either poor people or super mega rich people that steal off of me.
I don't think I've seen the scene where she goes in to visit him since its original airing, but I just remember kind of leaving it with a bit of a warm fuzzy feeling, thinking, oh, they're really nice together.
How did they? I can't remember what.
I think she just goes in there and she talks to him and she helps him to see, you know, how this has affected her, and they just end up having sort of clicking, and then when he comes out, they end up working their way towards each other.
He knows where she lives.
Yeah, exactly. And it was. I remember finding it such a shame how little time they got together, because he ends up going off with Eileen, which on paper is quite good, because, you know, we talked about that feud with Gail and Eileen earlier, and her taking Gail's man away from her is going to cause fireworks, isn't it? But I was gutted, because I just wanted Gail and Michael to settle down, and I didn't think that he was suited to Eileen. It did smack a little bit of plot driven rather than character driven.
Was too overbearing for him. He's a very gentle man.
Yeah.
So Nick and David did not want them to have a relationship because he'd been a burglar. Mm-hmm. And then he discovers that he's got this heart condition when he traces his family, doesn't he? And there's this whole thing with Gavin and Andy, where
Gavin, the fake, the actual son Gavin, and Andy pretending to be his fake son.
Yeah, and because
that was great. I loved everything to do with Michael. Well, nearly everything to do with Michael Rodwell.
Andy poses as Gavin and pretends to be him.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Michael's trying to propose to Gail, and she turns him down. Then he proposes again, and he has a heart attack. And then Gail stands him up on the first wedding day because she's been confronted by the real Gavin, and she doesn't tell him because he's got this heart problem, so he doesn't want them to know. And then they do get married the second time. She nearly does a guilt jilt, but she goes and marries him. But then he leaves her when he finds out that he had been lied to.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten that was.
And there's that brilliant scene where he's going through the picture album, like going, "This isn't the same guy."
Yes.
And it was honestly utterly ridiculous, but I loved it so much. This whole thing, and Andy just kind of being really guilty and realizing that he couldn't get revenge on his real dad by doing this to Michael, because Michael wasn't actually as bad as Gavin had made out.
Yeah.
And then Gavin dies because he never found out about this congenital heart problem that he shares with his dad. It was just so ridiculously soapy. I loved it.
The heart problem thing was just, in my mind, hanging over Michael all the time that he was in the show. And as soon as he got diagnosed with that, I was thinking, one of these days, and I think partly because it was Les Dennis, and I always thought that he was a bit of a celebrity cameo,
He's a bit like
if you
a
like.
Claire Sweeney, where you're like, how long are you really going to be?
But equally, you could say a Maureen Lipman, and she's still going. I know that she's going to be reducing the number of times that of appearances.
Maybe,
she's kind of taking a bit of a step to the side. But yeah, as soon as some sort of a known name comes in, you think, how long is this going to last?
Well, but also because the track record of Coronation Street with kind of celebrities is they do cameos and that's it.
Yeah. And eventually it did end up catching up with him, didn't it?
Well, he was the victim of Pat Phelan, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a great scene, but yeah, gutted that it had to come to that. And Michael Rodwell was just an absolute gem. And it was really lovely going to see him or going to see Les Dennis and Conor McIntyre in Panto that one year where they were playing the Ugly Sisters in the Cinderella.
He was
got
fantastic.
To meet them afterwards. He
didn't
was
really
nice
get
guy.
to say much to Les Dennis, but I wish I had said more because I really wanted him to know that he was appreciated by some people.
Yeah.
Because he got so much stick, I just find it unbelievable how cruel people were for no reason at all. Because he was great.
On to S then
on
in
to
our
someone
alphabet.
who should be getting stick.
Sarah Louise.
Stick for Sarah is under S, and she is Gail's only daughter.
Yes, second child, middle child.
Yeah, middle child syndrome, going out and getting pregnant. Everyone knows that old story.
I don't know how much there is to talk about Sarah. I was kind of racking my brains when I was planning this, and a lot of when I think of Gail and Sarah, I think about the teenage pregnancy bit, which we've kind of already covered.
It's because she went away for quite a lot of time with Bethany to go and
she
live
went away
in
for 10 years or so,
Italy.
didn't she? Yeah.
And they picked up so much of the culture and the language while they were there.
I remember, I think that there's definitely much more of a mellower relationship between Gail and Sarah now than there ever was. Like when Sarah, like we said earlier, was a new mum and she wanted to go out partying with Candice and Gail was trying to stop her, or she wanted to move in with Todd and Gail was trying to stop her. She was definitely in full-on meddling mother mode there. Something that we didn't mention earlier, which was a great Gail moment that always stuck with me, was the time when I think she was with Martin on a march up the school to try and confront Neil Ferns, the father of Bethany, and then see him he's just a lad kicking a football.
That was a really great scene.
And it was a very sobering moment.
Could have been in like any gritty drama, couldn't it? Just these two parents furious, and then just realise he is just a boy. I cannot.
Yeah.
And it was just really shocking too, because you're like, children can't do that, can they?
Would you say that they're just kind of got more of a friends relationship now as Sarah's been accepted and been allowed to be an adult to get on with her own thing?
Yeah, I think more than David and Nick. I think because I think Gail dotes on Nick, and I think she feels like she has to baby David. But with Sarah, she's got a similar relationship that she's got with Audrey, where they're just they're friends and they kind of don't. I think they don't take any of the. I don't think that Audrey takes Gail seriously. I don't think Gail takes Audrey seriously, and I think that the same thing, Gail and Sarah, vice versa. Especially Sarah with Gail. I just don't think she really sort of. I don't think she'd go, "Oh, I need some advice. I'll ask my mum."
Who, Sarah?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think she would. I think there's been the odd scene.
I think she'd be more like to ask Carla.
Do you reckon? I don't know. I think that they've had their nice moments like that. But
they're
equally,
friends,
I think,
like you say, they're friends.
And I think that actually does mirror nice. Audrey with Gail quite well, actually.
Yeah.
The fact that Sarah is still going to cause massive drama, but Gail's kind of away from it. I don't think she's brought too much trouble directly to the Platt's door.
They're close
recently,
but weirdly
not
distant
like David.
At the same time, because sort of Sarah's reaction to Gail going, "I'm going to move to France," is going, "Oh, well, I'm glad you're going to enjoy your life, your retirement." Whereas if my mum was like, "I'm going to live in France," I'd be like, "Well, I can't. How am I supposed to go and live in France then?" I'd be like, "Well, we have to go together, aren't we?" Yeah. I'd be crying if my mum moved to France. Yeah. I wouldn't be like, "Oh."
It's interesting how, whereas the being tied up in a car and driven into a canal sent David into his demonic phase, Sarah was kind of just let it wash over her, didn't she? I don't think she held a grudge quite in the same way as David did. She held a grudge
to David because she and David had such a tumultuous childhood together.
Oh, they were great bickering.
A lot of the time, David's ire kind of like fell on Sarah, and she suffered quite a lot because of it, and maybe that's why she's a bit more distant from her mum, because really Gail didn't protect Sarah from David at all. She kind of indulged a lot of it and absorbed his abuse towards her, but when David was doing things like driving into the canal when it's supposed to be Sarah's wedding, she's like, oh, poor David. And then also, you know, the ecstasy pill that Bethany, that's a shame. You know,
No, I thought that a few of the times Gail was like, enough is enough. She's definitely thrown David out of the house a few times.
I know, but I feel like if I was Sarah, I'd probably feel a bit like I had a bit
I think
short change.
Yeah, I think that Sarah does absolutely feel like she has had less of her parents' attention than the other two.
Because don't forget, when she was 13, she had a baby of her own, and then Gail was focused on Bethany and not so much Sarah. So she kind of missed out on being a teen, you know, with her mum. When you're a girl and you're that age, your mum's supposed to be the person who shows you how to be a woman. Yeah. Gail obviously missed that one because she went straight from child to mother.
But then she didn't really have it with Audrey as well, did she, Gail? Because she didn't exactly get the best upbringing, did she?
It's interesting, I think, that Gail and Audrey seem to have been more focused on their sons than you know. I mean, obviously Audrey had Stephen. Yeah. And with Gail, she seems to be more focused on the two boys.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't say she's, you know, don't blaming her. I'm just saying it's an interesting dynamic to think about. I don't think anyone sat down in Coronation Street and gone, we must make sure that we maintain this distance between Sarah. I think it just happened because of the way the plots worked out. But you can certainly chart a kind of similarity between those two, and I always find women who are more obsessed with their sons to be a bit odd, to be honest with you.
Something I just wanted to mention before.
Either way, you know, being obsessed with one gender of child over the other always just seems to be a bit weird.
Well, we've all got our favourites, haven't we?
I know, but
something I wanted to mention
really
about
because
Sarah.
You can't help what bits she got.
Something I wanted to mention about Sarah before moving on was how I thought it was interesting that they touched on her parentage story. Just last year, I think it was, wasn't it, when Sarah Louise found out that she was, at that one time, Gail wasn't sure whether Sarah was
Ian Latimer's
child or Brian's. Yeah, because Brian had this Australian cousin and this charmer that comes in and woos Gail, and this is what, 86, 87 kind of time.
I really, really wanted them to bring Ian Latimer into the show, and I told you who my casting was, didn't I? So
who did you say?
What's his Rhys Darcy?
I don't know who that is.
He's the swearwolf.
Oh, okay. From What We Do in the Shadows, yeah. Yeah, so that was cool how that was brought back into the
Darby, not Darcy.
Oh, okay, it was brought back into the show last year, but it was more kind of a 1 or 2 episode thing just to cause a bit of drama and then moved on. But anyway,
he's also from New Zealand.
There we go. Okay, T is for Tilsley. Speaking of Brian, he is he the final husband that we haven't mentioned yet? I think he probably is, isn't he? The first husband to happen, but the last husband. Thank you. The last husband for us to chat about. And I'm going to say that I don't think either of us have got a whole lot of personal memories to talk about with Brian, have we? Because he was definitely not of our era. Yes, I've seen the 80s episodes a very, very long time ago, and we've both watched like DVD episodes with him in. And equally, I don't think that either of us have got that fond an impression of him, did we? I don't know whether we would have liked him. He was very kind of jockey and full of himself, and
he was a bit of a lad. He wasn't a lad, but he was like sporty. But I don't know how much of that is me getting confused with Chris Quinton, who played him. He was like a big buff kind of crystal domey. What did he do?
He did the Krypton Factor. He was definitely a bit of a looker, and I think he was a hunk of the day in 1980, and I don't usually...
Was Gail punching?
I don't usually find hunky characters that interesting, although I do have a soft spot for Jason Grimshaw, I have to say. I think I think he's a great character. But Brian, like we said, was fairly bad for Gail, and he ends up cheating on her numerous times.
He just feels like a man's man to me. You know, he had a wife because he had to have a wife because he was a straight man, and but I don't think he ever really was not interested in women or what they had to say about anything.
I think that if I might be making things up here and putting words in the mouths of the Corrie writers, I don't know, but I imagine that he settled down with Gail because that's the thing that you did, and he wanted to have a family, and he wanted somebody to cook his tea and wash his pants for him, and then but equally, he was the Kevin of his and then he still wanted to go out to the pub, and he was he was a mechanic, so he liked doing his stuff with his cars, and I don't ever feel like he kind of was really, really besotted with Gail.
No,
but
he went off to guitar for years.
It still did lead to all those brilliant scenes with Gail and Ivy. So even though I don't have particularly fond memories of the married couple together, I'm very, very glad it happened, because it brought about the mother-in-law from hell, who was one of my favourite characters and most underappreciated characters of the era.
Brian was very neglectful of her, really, and he also was a massive mummy's boy, because he let Ivy spoil him. He expected Gail. He didn't want Gail to work. He wanted her to be a housewife.
Yeah,
they fought a lot about it, because Gail's a modern woman who wanted to do both. And then this is why he kind of drove her into the arms of Ian Latimer. Yeah. And then
that was good for Gail in a way, wasn't it? It kind of cemented her as a modern woman.
Yeah.
And so I'm fighting against the idea that I just should be tied to the kitchen.
I really actually we've only seen the ones on the DVDs, but I really enjoyed the scenes of Gail as a mum. And I just don't think Corrie does that anymore, because it was the same era as you had Deirdre with Tracy.
Yeah.
And they were both just mums who were going, you watched her getting dinner ready, and then
doing the nappies
and like having the baby and trying to make sure the baby was not killing itself while you're doing the dinner. And then people would come around and go, "Oh, it's a bit of a mess in there, isn't it, Gal? You're a bit of a crap housewife, aren't you?" It was probably Ivy.
It was quite slice of life.
It really felt like Gail's. You were watching a real woman struggle, and now you don't see that. The only time you ever see anyone struggling with motherhood particularly is when they're going psychotic and being sectioned or having postpartum depression. But there's a
Gail
lot
didn't
more
have
to...
any of that.
No,
she just found motherhood quite hard, which I guess it is.
And it was difficult. I just really like that, and I've never seen that on Coronation Street since that very particular era, and I don't know if it was a producer that was sort of pushing it or writers.
Well, Corrie was much more reflective of the day-to-day drudgery of normal life back in the 80s, wasn't it? Yeah.
She wasn't like, "Oh, I can't believe I've got to do the washing up and I also have to cure cancer and raise awareness." Brian
ended up having another shocking ending, didn't he? And I think, the thinking back to how infrequently people on Corrie died back in the day, and
you've written stabby.
I've written stabby in my notes there just to remind me.
In case you forgot.
What happened in the end. I think it was pretty dark and shocking for the time. It was a bit like
grim.
It was a bit like when Ernest Bishop got shot in the factory, and people often refer to that when they say, "Well, Corrie's not always been. It wasn't all sweetness and light and light humour back in those days. It was there was darkness as well." But Brian's stabbing scene really was quite
horrible,
quite visceral, and you see his face as the knife goes in, and he's left there in this bathed in neon light outside the dark nightclub. It was really, really well done. And then he's there lying on the floor as his floozy comes back to look at him over the end credits. It was a really, really affecting death scene, and does it hold up to the other deaths of her other husbands? Well, clearly not Richard. Michael, a lot of Gail's husbands really did have quite spectacular deaths, doesn't it?
Really quite horrible.
If he didn't have those to compete with,
Brian's
death. I mean, it's really difficult these days to say, well, who's got the most explosive or
memorable.
memorable.
Was the worst death.
But at the time, and I remember this from when I was starting to watch it in the 90s and doing a bit of a read into, what's this show? Well, let me read about the last 30 years or so that I've missed. That always kind of stood out as being a particularly shocking and violent and dark death. So he's got that going for him, I suppose.
Two of her husbands killed themselves, and one of them had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So he's the only one who didn't,
He's the only one that's been murdered.
Yeah.
Although Phelan did still count Rodwell as one of his victims, and he just didn't help him up after his heart attack. Yeah. So anyway, that's Brian. And speaking of the canal scene, U is for underwater. We are definitely getting into the area of the alphabet now that was a bit more of a struggle to assign words to. But underwater, I think, you can't speak Gail without talking about the canal scene. Quite possibly one of her... Well, is this her most famous moment?
Yeah.
And one of the most famous moments in all of Coronation Street? So if that doesn't merit it deserving a letter of its own, well, I don't know what does.
And if you're interested in watery moments, you might want to listen to our Patreon episode.
Oh, get a plug in.
About our top 5 watery moments, if you can join our Patreon.
This was on there.
It was on there, yeah.
This is such an epic scene. The story really didn't miss a beat the whole of the Hillman saga, and sometimes you get these big stories that kind of flub the ending. You can always
moan
but
we do.
This one absolutely didn't.
Great.
Tying the family up in the back of the car, in the garage, driving out with a You and Me song blasting on the radio. The You and Me song originally, although if you were to watch it on ITVX now, you would find something else plays because the rights have run out. But yeah, What an epic scene, and I've spoken many times on the podcast about how I remember watching this at our shared student house, and you were out doing your cleaning job, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I was like, as soon as you get back from cleaning, it's like, I want to watch this again, Gemma. This is the most epic episode of Coronation Street. And even I think it was the next day they had on whatever the ITV morning show was back then, GMTV or whatever, they had interviews with the cast, and they talked about pulling the car into the canal, and you can visit the place now, can't you? Portland Basin is where it was filmed,
and a social museum.
We've been there a few times. Well, in fact, that this has inspired one of my favourite ever video moments that we've done for the podcast. If you remember back in 2020 when we were on lockdown and had plenty of time for podcast stuff, we did a series of videos that was ranking. It was going through the decades, wasn't it? And Corriepedia was running some polls where you had to rate every single character, and we rated them on video, but also filmed a little before and after segment. We did a little skit, didn't we? Did. And it began like in the 60s. It was just me talking to the camera, and there was a black and white background, and that was about as fancy as you got. But by the time we got to the last one, which was Villains, who Corriepedia had separately, we actually went up to Manchester. We were going anyway, weren't we?
Yeah, we didn't do
and we filmed a scene with me tied up in the back of the car.
That was so nerve-wracking.
Driving down the road near Portland Basin. Gemma was the stunt driver in this, and I was then like pulling the gag out of my mouth and then presenting to the camera, and then
it's so stupid.
At the very end of it, at the very end of the video, we have me pretending to climb out of the water, the same canal that the Platts crashed into.
What a ham you are!
I was very hammy with it, but honestly, that's one of my favourite things that we've ever done. For video.
Yeah, because it was
such an epic scene.
Yeah, we had to do a tribute to it.
Yeah, for sure. I just loved how it was underwater they showed, and this was
Worth
huge.
Could not swim.
No, Helen Worth couldn't even swim for this. She had 12 swimming lessons, and she said a couple of years ago, and I assume this hasn't changed since, she says that she hasn't been underwater since. But yeah, she had a few lessons, and she was doing tricks underwater and everything. But
she doesn't even she said, I don't even like to put my head under the shower.
Yeah.
I hate getting my hair wet. So imagine doing this, filming.
It was just it felt so Hollywood, didn't it? Because Corrie has underwater scenes. Corrie doesn't do that sort of thing lightly, but it was just perfect climax to what was a massive story. And the camera was there, and Gail was banging on the window screen, and then they get out Richard grabbing hold of her leg, and she has to kick him free.
I mean, what a trooper!
Amazing.
Imagine going from no experience whatsoever, 4 to 5 lessons, and then being like, right, okay, so you probably won't have to act the drowning. I couldn't do it.
But this was all filmed in a giant water tank, wasn't it? So they were safe, but
you can. There's a lot that can go wrong.
Things could have gone wrong, but they didn't. And I suppose the closest we've had to this in recent memory was the underground stuff when Johnny died, and Jenny had to swim underwater. That was equally epic. But just to be hit by this, and this was back in the day when the spoilers weren't as abundant as they were these days. couldn't go online
You
to
wouldn't
find
stumble
about
across
those.
one unless you looked at a soap magazine.
And now I can try and avoid spoilers, which I do, but I still do stumble on things all the time. And I remember just sitting there not expecting this and being absolutely blown away.
That must have been amazing.
It was one of the best Coronation Street
knew
episodes ever.
You told me.
I told you that something big was going to happen. And it's just so rewatchable. The whole of that episode, absolutely.
It's
superb.
it's kind of like the tram crash in that it's huge.
Yeah.
And of course, Martin was there.
Martin was there.
Yeah.
He was helping out, wasn't he? Martin and Tommy and was it Kevin trying to rescue them from the water?
What was the song they've? Oh, 'cause you're gorgeous.
Yeah, they've replaced it now with "You're Gorgeous" on ITV.
I don't know.
Terrible.
I don't understand
Terrible.
the logic of that particular song. But okay, it's not my job to
well, they
sort it out.
I want to see what they do when they put up the. Is it 2007 when David stages the crash into the water again on Jason and Sarah's wedding day, and he plays the "You and Me" song as he's driving into it. So is ITVX also going to put "You're Gorgeous" on? And people are like, "What's going on there?" Anyway, I assume that everybody listening to this has seen that episode, but if you haven't, stop whatever you're doing and get and watch it now.
Right, we're in the proper arse end of the alphabet now, aren't we? We're scraping the barrel. But Michael's done a really good job. This is Michael.
I tried.
Michael has put this together.
V is for vindication.
Vindication
I wanted to mention Gail in prison at some point.
Yes.
Gail in jail.
This is a big story for her.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's one that gets forgotten a little bit. People kind of go, "Oh, do you remember that time when Gail was in jail?" "Oh, yeah," and then move on.
Well, it's because there have been loads of other stories very similar, and Deirdre's
wrongful
one was
imprisonment.
The biggest, and Sally's had hers, and
I think when Gail was in prison, I don't think it wasn't as commonplace, but I think it's impossible for Coronation Street to do a wrongful imprisonment story without people saying, well, it's not as good as when it happened to Deirdre. But vindication, that side of it. I mean, scrolling back a little bit, Gail was in prison because she was accused of murdering Joe McIntyre. We talked earlier about how he ended up with a bit of a watery grave, and she's accused of murdering him, and then she ends up going to prison, and eventually she gets transferred into a cell, or Tracy Barlow gets transferred into a cell with her. Tracy's serving time at Her Majesty's pleasure for clonking Charlie Stubbs over the head. So she's gone down for murder, and we hadn't seen her on screen for like 3 years. So it was lovely seeing Tracy again. But she was kind of brought in to try and... Well, the motivation for the character was that she wanted to be moved into an open prison, I think. And so she said that she would try and get a confession out of Gail, to say that she actually killed Joe with a rolling pin, I think it was. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the plan doesn't work. Tracy ends up getting beaten up in a jail cell when it's found out that she was not telling the truth and ratting on another prisoner. And Gail gets set free. What was particularly notable about this, though, was one of the few times when Coronation Street has filmed 2 versions of an outcome of a story.
Good point.
Which is why, this is why it's worth mentioning. I could have V for version as well, I suppose. But it was a really great...
V for verdict.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be any of those. There you go. This is the perfect V storyline here. But it was a really impressive scene because they visited a big court for it, and I think they had some like crane shots. I remember when the verdict is given and the camera like pans out and Gail's celebrating. But then the big scene that was filmed twice was the outside the court building afterwards, where she comes down the steps, and in one of them she does come down the steps because she's been set free, and the other one, the family come down and Gail's been sent down. I don't remember whether we actually watched these. These were available online on the itv.com/Corrie website. I don't remember seeing them. And it's a similar... I think this has come from the period when Coronation Street was a little bit more experimental with their online offerings and maybe trying to attract people to its website. I mean, these days you don't need to. That's the thing. I mean, the Coronation Street website these days is a bit of a dump, really, and a bit of a fire, and it needs a massive overhaul, or does it? Because nobody ever seems to visit it, because people don't visit websites these days. But back then, when they did, and they had a load of adverts, so they needed people to go there, they would put things up like interactive games or online spin-offs, or, as I say in this case, alternate versions of scenes, because they did the same thing and I think it was the same year, or very close at least, with Tony Gordon killing off Liam Connor, and they had like 3 versions of Liam Connor's death there, didn't they? And I think that they've been lost. I think it's, I don't know, what's it called when something isn't available?
Media.
Lost media. Yeah, it's not available on the internet anymore. If you want to watch the other version of Gail's exit, the other version of Gail's verdict, or the other versions of Liam being killed, you just can't anymore. Which is sad. I'm sure it's somewhere in the archives somewhere.
Yeah, they've got it.
But I thought that this was quite notable.
They should put it on YouTube.
They should. They totally should. I don't think they think the interest is there for it, but it kind of is. But equally, if they just decide to plop it on there one day, it might feel a bit random. But why not just, spend this final week that we've got with Gail putting various Gail tidbits online? I'm sure people would appreciate it.
I mean, the Coronation Street YouTube account is fascinating to me because they put clips on, and they've got 500,000 subscribers, and all of the top 4 videos are just snogging, and David nearly catches Callum and Sarah is the most viewed. 28 million people have seen this, and I would love to know how much money Coronation Street has made, if any, because it's a 1 minute 10-second clip. I don't know if you can monetize that, but
yeah, I think so.
Putting clips up of stuff is all well and good, but this,
they went through a phase on their YouTube channel of uploading old clips. I was looking
unique things that.
Oh yeah, they did unique things as well, but they used to do old clips as well. Like when I was reading up about this Carmel Finnan thing, I reminded myself of some of that earlier. They've put various key moments from that story on the ITV Corrie website, YouTube channel, 7 years ago, and they just don't really seem to do that anymore. And obviously Corrie seems still very, very resistant to put large quantities of old episodes on ITVX, where, you got all these... Is it Neighbours have got a load of old ones up, and BBC have on their iPlayer have put up decades worth of EastEnders on there.
I know it sounds so obvious to us, but it must be a rights thing.
I wonder it's to do with music that plays in the episodes.
Well, it's also to do with who the actors still do get some royalties, I think.
I don't know. I'm still holding out hope that one day we'll get that. But anyway, we're kind of digressing a bit from the point
here. They could put it on YouTube, because they'd actually wouldn't have to host it, and they would get adverts without doing any work.
Yeah. Do you have any particular fond memories of this story, or is it to you also just a kind of, oh yeah, that happened story?
I would have really struggled to tell you what it was she was even accused of, to be honest.
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting idea to have her share a cell with Tracy on the Gail compilation video that was put online just last week. There's a great little clip from it where Gail's kind of bemoaning the fact that it wasn't the drowning that killed Joe, it was recession or something like that. Yeah. And Gail's there giggling away on her tuck bunk in the cell. But yeah, I think that,
You mean Tracy?
Tracy, sorry. What did I say?
Gail,
sorry.
Gail's going, it was the recession.
Gail laughing at herself. No, but the moment that the verdict and the vindication came through, that's what I wanted to put as my V. It's a notable time in Gail's history, but maybe not so notable as everything else.
Not as notable as the next one.
My W, I'm sure, W is, like you said, the arse end of the alphabet, but I'm sure I probably could have come up with something better than this. But my W letter is weather warning, strong gales.
We got to mention this meme.
I couldn't get through a Gail tribute without mentioning perhaps the most widespread of Gail internet sensations, and that is her head placed on the body of some muscular sort. Every time there's a big Gail storm across the UK, some bright spark will put that on Twitter.
You have to.
There's various versions of it. It's like there is the classic one is the big buff guy, the blue outfit, and Gail's head's there.
I thought it was a purple tank top.
No, I don't think so. I don't know. See if you can find it. It's probably very easy. But there are other ones that's like a picture, a map of the UK, and Gail's heads are everywhere. There's also an offshoot of it, which was widespread Gail's, which was some very flexible gymnast opening their leg very, very wide and having Gail's head pasted onto her as well. But again, I wonder
who came up with it.
I like how Gail has become a meme in so many ways, and I don't think that you can say the same of many other Coronation Street characters. She's such an icon. She's known by so many people all over the country, whether or not they watch Coronation Street. And obviously, classic Coronation Street, vintage Coronation Street has got a number of characters who are very well known. Everybody knows who, would recognise Ena Sharples or Hilda or anybody from back in the day. But modern Coronation Street, I don't think has got that many characters that are so instantly recognisable by the general public as Gail, and the fact that she's been memed just kind of proves it, really.
Well, there was also that, the storm a couple of years ago that was called Storm Corrie, and how could we resist the hilarity that would be involved with having breaking Gale Force winds.
Yes. So she's got her Gail, she's got her olives, she's got her I'm on pills for God's sake, and by golly, that's enough for anybody. But I don't think there's much more that we can talk about. Though,
well, no, we're kind of scraping the barrel here.
Yeah.
So the next one, talking of scraping the barrel, is X for Exit.
X for Exit. Yeah, I just couldn't. Did Gail ever play a xylophone? No. Has she ever had any notable X-rays? Not that I can remember.
What else is there?
Is she xenophobic? No, she's very supportive of all things foreign.
We've never known one way or the other. Where did Max get his opinions from?
Yeah. I suppose I could have had Max for X as well, couldn't I?
Why?
Well, because he's got an X
Max.
in his name. It's
so
just
do
backwards.
I, but I wouldn't claim that letter for the alphabet.
I need your surname,
for myself.
So we haven't talked about her exit really at all yet. And as we said at the beginning of the podcast, we are recording this a few days before her final episode is airing. So what we're going to do is have a little bit of a pause and then record something in a little bit and insert it here so that you can find out firsthand what we thought of Gail's departure. So
bye, young Gemma.
Yeah, see you in a few days.
See ya.
Okay, we're back. We've seen it. It's Christmas Day. We're actually recording this on Christmas Day, so I couldn't wait. Merry Christmas.
No rest for the wicked.
We've seen Gail's exit. She's gone. I can't believe it. So,
au revoir, Gail.
Au revoir, Gail. So, well, let's just have a chat about what we made of her exit. Not just the last few days, but, the story in general. Because we've known that this was coming since June this year. 5th of June it was announced. So we've all been mentally preparing for this. I've seen criticism online about how our exit's been handled, some of which being mostly people upset with the fact that Martin didn't make it in there in the end. And a lot of the criticism has also been she's not been in it much, which I totally get. We still haven't seen very much of Gail in her final year, have we? But I think when I look back on it, and maybe I'm just full of the Christmas spirit at the moment. I think I'm kind of happy with how it all ended for her. What are you thinking?
I think it's sweet. I think Jesse was a great guy. He's definitely got over his mummy issues. I assume she's dead.
Assume so.
He just seemed like a sweet bloke. Weird he didn't have any of his own friends at the wedding, but we will ignore that.
Nobody would have picked Jesse to come back, would they?
A couple of people did.
Even as a first choice, let's say. But I think it worked. I think that John Thompson did a really good job. I believed the romance between the two of them from what little we saw of it on screen. And they had a really, really lovely wedding episode.
Gail, Helen Worth has not been given very many opportunities to show off her acting, but her beaming smile in today's episode, the Christmas Day one where she gets married to Jesse, it was just so beautiful to see her really happy and smiling and sort of having heart-to-hearts with all of her children, telling them
She was given some really great dialogue in today's episode. It was Jan McVerry who wrote the Christmas one, and the speeches that she delivered, and Jesse and David and all of them were just absolute. They hit all the right notes for me. I wasn't necessarily needing her to be married off. She could have just gone off with a friend, but actually it was kind of sweet. It was a real feel-good episode on the whole, wasn't it?
Well, I was always criticising the idea that Gail has to run off with a man because, she's gone through many and she's never found one that suited. Perhaps it's not for her. But the fact that her whole shtick on Coronation Street was just getting married and they all turn out to be dreadful, it kind of does bring it to a sort of happy conclusion. Are you imagining Jesse is going to be the one for her? Because I'm sort of imagining him turning up, washed up on the shores of the Mediterranean before the end of next year, but maybe not.
No, I think that she's got a good one in the end. I wish that the final scene her final line had been that au revoir to Sally rather than the Mrs. Chadwick, Mr. Chadwick in the car. That's kind of being nitpicky about it.
It feels a bit like, okay, just another one to your list.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned the Richard Hillman return, which we alluded to earlier in the episode when we'd heard rumours that Brian Capron had returned to Coronation Street to make a little cameo. Wow, that was pretty great.
Oh, I thought that was brilliant. He turned up.
I wish that it hadn't been leaked beforehand. It was fab. I love the idea of him dripping wet, covered in seaweed. Brian has done a bit of an interview with ITV and kind of said he enjoyed the dark humour of it. And I thought, again, those scenes were really, really nicely written. And it was just kind of creepy and a good throwback, weren't they?
Yeah, I loved him turning up like a spooky ghost dripping. It felt very Victorian or kind of Lovecraftian almost. Yeah. And then you had him dancing with her with the disco lights and the sofa with all the pictures of old characters. Like there was Ena Sharp or Elsie Tanner on there.
Oh, on the pillow, yeah.
There was I'm pretty sure there's Les Dennis on there. And also in the background, the stack of crates with French flags and garlic all over it. I tell you what, this is Gail's dream, okay? And obviously she's not got over those like early English sentiments about what it is to be in France. When she gets there and there's not festooned with garlic bottles, she's going to be disappointed.
When people are riding down the road on bicycles with garlic around their necks and stripy tops, so she's going to be like, are we sure in the right place, Jesse? I thought that the Richard Hillman, it wasn't at all needed, but it was still nice that they had it. I think that the episode would have been just as good without it, but as a let's do one last surprise thing. Yes. For a final episode, then you couldn't have got much bigger than that.
I mean, I know what everyone's saying about, I wish there had been more Gail, but really, I mean, the way Corrie has to be written, it would have just been more conflicts, more sadness, more arguments. This way, Gail was not around because she was off in sort of romantic bliss with Jesse. And then also the final episode with her having her moments with her mum and all of her children, telling all of her children they were her favourites individually was brilliant. And also that heart-to-heart with Sarah about her being the only daughter and stuff. It was really touching. Yeah. And the final scene of her sitting watching all the tapes. I thought it was lovely. It was a really, really good Christmas Day episode with Gail. It's fun. I mean, I don't think you could have wished for much more, really. I
think with the tapes, I was kind of sitting through the episode thinking, are they only going to show Eileen's one? But you're right, having that scene at the end where she was just on her own in the room was just absolutely masterstroke. I loved that. It was a great episode. Say what you like about the amount that Helen was or wasn't on the show. She's clearly, got a reduced workload.
I think she's calling the shots for how much she wanted to do.
It wasn't Coronation Street saying, no, we're not going to put you in it. They worked with what they had. Yeah. And I think, nothing's ever perfect, but I'm pretty darn satisfied with how that ended up, honestly. We'll say more about it on the end of the week podcast, no doubt. But yeah, that's my immediate thoughts on her exit. I am happy.
Yeah, me too.
Shall we cut back to the final couple of letters of the alphabet?
I think we should.
And we're back to the past for our final two letters of the alphabet. Oh, I wonder what we thought of Gail's exit. I mean, I've got plenty that I could say now in the lead up to it, but we're not going to, because hopefully, if all's gone to plan, you've just heard us talking about it. Let's whack straight on to why. And for why, I have gone with yearly episode counts.
That's fair enough.
We have got some stats for why.
Statistics.
Yeah, because, we talked at the beginning about how many episodes she's been in total and, the starting and ending dates. But this kind of thing fascinates me about how often characters appears in certain episodes.
It's very silly and nerdy, but I
it's
find
totally
it
nerdy. But if you've made it to, how long? Nearly 3 hours into a character profile of Gail from Corrie, then maybe you're a little bit nerdy too. Come on, admit it to yourself, just a tad.
Other hobbies have their, how many goals you scored, how many times you drive around in a circle.
Yeah. For Coronation Street characters, it's how many times you appear each year. So, stat fans. First year Gail was in it. We're not going to run through all 50, don't worry. She was only in 10 episodes. 1974, 10 episodes of Gail, that was it. And then in 1975... 37 episodes.
Oh.
What?
I mean, I feel like this goes without saying, But we should mention that the information we get is from Corripedia, coronationsstreet.fan.
Some of it comes from there, some of it comes from in my head.
Well, yes.
This part definitely is from Corripedia. Thank you very much for the
kings. Thank
people
you.
there for compiling
Yes,
this.
good job.
So yeah, first couple of years. I mean, in the 70s, she didn't make that many appearances. I suppose in the back end of the 70s and then well into the 80s, she was in about 60 episodes of the year, which wasn't huge, I suppose. I mean, I suppose compared to now, 60 episodes a year doesn't feel like much, but those were the days when there was only 2 episodes a week. So if they had 100 episodes in a year, then maybe 60 is quite a lot of it, really. But when we got to the 90s, that's when things really started ramping up. They went 3 episodes of the week, and Gail's was usually around in the 90s around 100 episodes in a year, with 1992 being 130. So that was a huge year for her. That was when the Carmel affair and story was all playing out, I think. And then in 1999, she had 142 episodes in a year.
My God.
I know. Well, like I said, this was kind of the late 90s, early 2000s was the beginning of her last golden era, or her next golden era. I don't know. She might have had one since, if you count.
You can do what you like.
You count what you like about the Lewis story, but
Make
yeah,
it
this was when she was having some feuds with the Battersbys over Leanne and Nick's relationship. Sarah Louise and David had just been recast. Martin was having her affair, so we saw a heck of a lot of Gail.
That Martin,
in 1999.
worst husband.
I know you've had your say about
Worst
that.
husband.
2000 was pretty high as well. 144 appearances there, and but our highest ever year, unsurprisingly, was in the midst of the Richard Hillman story, where in 2002 she had 152 appearances in a year. She was barely off our screens. Although, to be fair, 2013 was also quite high. She had 150 appearances in 2013. So I don't know what she was getting up to there, but that was around the beginning of the time that we started doing the podcast, wasn't it? And we always said that there was an awful lot of Platt action going on back in those days.
I tell you what, I know that we said that, Gail's kind of regressed into being a bit of a silly old fool in her twilight years, but at least she's escaped like the Weatherfield Waterworks curse of a strong woman, where they never really got her to like just spend 3 or 4 years crying and being sad. And
no. You're right, that counts a lot, actually. She has got to have a certain strength of character that despite all the misery that she went through, she didn't just sit and blub.
I mean, obviously it's what's the word? It's because of the way they write the stories now. But she's really lucky she got away with not just whinging for.
Well, it's partly also.
years.
I mean, she had a friend group that helped support her, and Audrey was there as well. I mean, if we're just comparing her to Lauren at the moment.
Reasons why.
Yeah, I am a little bit.
But that's fine though. I mean, it makes sense. But it is kind of notable if you want to compare the difference between how a character, a strong female main character of Coronation Street is treated in the current era, in the 2020s, compared to even back in the 2000s, just 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The difference now is just astonishing. What they do to women in the show.
But Gail certainly has decreased in appearances in the last 7-8 years, hasn't she? There was a notable decrease in 2017, and I don't think it's ever been kind of publicly said, why has this happened? But from I don't know how many episodes 2016
fair to
had.
Speculate that perhaps she has wanted a bit more of a quiet.
Yeah, taking the foot off the accelerator for a bit. Absolutely. If she's been in the show for 42, 43 years, at the point when she did decrease the episode numbers,
and also,
that is fair enough.
She's getting on in age. Most people would have retired by now.
Yeah.
And I think. I don't know that Coronation Street ever officially come out and sort of said anything particular, but I do know that there will be restrictions on some actors about how often they're going to appear, and I would not be surprised if Helen Worth hadn't negotiated some kind of I'm not coming in on a.
Yeah, well, she also had to. I think she was in the group that literally couldn't come in during the lockdown. Well,
yeah, during COVID and stuff
and everything. But yeah, so basically, you had in 2017, you had a massive decrease to just 61 episodes.
That wasn't COVID.
No, this was not COVID. This was pre-COVID. But so it went to like late 60s, early 70s kind of numbers, and then in the years since, it's been kind of anywhere between 50 and 80, that kind of region. this year we're recording this part of it before her final episode, so the final numbers aren't in, but just under 40 episodes this year. Barely anything. This is her third lowest year ever. So she started off with 10, then went to 37, funny. And now she's kind of bookended
she's tapered off, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is literally the lowest she's ever been in a year since her first 2 years in Coronation Street, when there weren't even 6 episodes anyway in a week to be in.
Yeah. More Gail stats for you, just as we're in the region. So she hit 1,000 episodes in 1991. So it took her a good 15 odd years or so to do that. 2,000 episodes she managed in 2000.
Do you get a special award for that?
Probably. Have a little plaque or something.
She hit
her 3,000th episode in 2008, her 4,000th episode in 2016, and she is not going to be hitting that 5,000. You know, maybe she will come back.
What's that, Gailbot 3,000? Hello, I have come
I just want to beat Ken's total episode count.
I am fueled by olives.
The highest number of consecutive appearances that she's ever had was in 1992, when she appeared in 42 consecutive episodes of Coronation Street.
What is this, the Gail show?
What?
That's what people would be saying.
I was going to say, this is the Gail show that we're recording right now.
Why is Gail in it all the time?
And the highest number of consecutive absences, unsurprisingly, was this year, where she had 104 episodes with not a single bit of Gail.
And this, you know, lots of things have been, lots of people have observed this. We're not the only ones who've, said, I know we haven't tried not to kind of make a big deal about this, because I'm sure there are very many good reasons, and certainly don't agree with forcing people to go into work just because I want to watch them on the telly. But, it's sad that she, in her final year, she wasn't really in the show, and even in her exit story, she was barely in it.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know how you could get around it.
No, maybe we mentioned that when we did our talk about her exit story in the future.
What does that mean?
Well, we just had to leave a space for us to insert our chat about our exit stories. We might have talked about that. I don't know. Let's move on to Zed. What on earth could Zed stand for? And again, at one point I was going to have zany.
You told me this was going to be zany.
I said it was going to be zany at some point, and we could have a celebration of the kooky Gail that we've had in the last few years. But I thought I'd probably end up with me kind of having a bit of a moan about her. But something that we haven't touched on at all in this is what Helen Worth got up to in the years before Coronation Street. So I'm having Zed standing for Z Cars. So it's nothing to do with Coronation Street, but Helen's first TV appearance was way back in 1963 in an episode of Z Cars, which was a police show. Z
Cars is like our lost media, isn't it? You and me, because Z Cars is like haunts Coronation Street.
Everyone was in it.
It was like the progenitor of like the Bill and Casualty and other soaps for people being in it before they were in Coronation Street. Almost everyone was in Z Cars at some point.
Apparently so.
And I've never seen. I don't know what it is, and I kind of like the fact I don't know. I think we probably should try and find some old episodes on YouTube.
While you were in bed earlier, I was watching the Gail and Me documentary, because it's only like 22 minutes or so, and they did show a clip of young Helen.
Can I just point out that Michael would go up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, so that's why I was
Gemma
asleep.
wasn't being lazy.
I was being lazy later in that morning, but
at this time you were just
I was just normal sleeping.
Yeah, so there's a clip of a very, very young Gail. She's kind of like kneeling next to a bike, and she's being talked to by maybe her mum or a nan or something, I can't remember, and it's so funny seeing her. She was in black and white.
Oh gosh,
I don't even know whether that episode is available as a whole anywhere else, but that was her first telly debut. She had quite a few things under her belt by the time she got in to Coronation Street. She went to she apparently her love of acting came from her grandmother, who ran a theatrical boarding house, and so she went to private school and then drama school and did Z Cars. But she was also in Oliver, the film Oliver.
What?
Oh, I know.
Was she Nancy?
She was an uncredited urchin, apparently. I've not seen a clip of that. I'm going on IMDb here.
That's how I live my life. My vibes are I want to go through life as uncredited urchin.
I don't think I've ever sat through Oliver.
Really?
It just doesn't appeal to me in the slightest.
I
But
just
now I
watch
know
it
that Helen's been in it.
for the porridge.
I mean, I call her Helen. Here's something else.
I didn't know
for
this.
fact
I thought you were
fans.
going to lead with this.
Sorry, no. Well, Helen Worth isn't actually her name. She was born Catherine Helen Wrigglesworth, which I think is an amazing name, but I get why you might want to change it if you're looking for a stage name.
Wrigglesworth.
Catherine Wrigglesworth
To
is her
Helen
actual
Worth.
name.
Makes sense.
Do you think if people call out Catherine, she goes, yes?
I don't know. What do you think her friends call her? Kathy?
I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, in Z-Cars, apparently she is credited as Helen Wrigglesworth at the end of that. I don't know when her credits. I don't know when her credits
and she spells
changed to
it
Helen
with a
Worth.
Y too, Catherine.
Yeah.
Which is a very fancy name.
Another famous role that Helen was in the 70s, of course, was Doctor Who. She was in the serial Colony in Space, which we watched.
We watched
last
some of that,
year.
didn't we?
Yeah. She was
getting her food from the communal
space canteen.
Yeah,
she lived in a far off colony in a universe that Doctor Who comes and investigates. And don't they get attacked by giants?
There's like weird monsters.
Yeah,
Not all is as it seems.
Yeah, so that is Doctor Who, really, isn't it? People getting attacked
Doctor
by
Who
weird
turns
monsters.
up. There's an uncredited
Doctor Who.
There's an uncredited urchin who's eating from a space buffet. And then monsters arrive.
Yeah.
He's called Doctor Who. He's been called Doctor Who in the show.
I know he has.
As soon as I found that out, I was like, I'm just totally justified calling him Doctor. Everyone knows who you mean. If you say Doctor Who, people know who you mean. If you say the Doctor, you've got to already have established you're talking about Doctor Who.
Okay, fine. Look,
I don't care.
Doctor Who was
This isn't
followed
a
by a
Doctor
couple
Who
of other
podcast.
TV shows, but eventually Corrie beckoned, and the rest is history. Like we said, she came in as Trisha Hopkins' friend. She was just going to be... I think she got a 6-episode contract,
well, it sounds
I read
to me
originally.
like she got told, like, you're either going to be in it for 50 years or you can get bent.
They basically said to her, look, do you want to stay? Because if not, we're going to get rid of you. And she was like, yeah, I'll take a punt on it. And I don't think, nobody ever expects that they're going to be in a show for 50 years. It's like when you get you see the interviews with William Roach and say, did you know back then? Did you have any inkling that you would be in a show for 65 years? No, of course not.
Because they'd only just invented television.
I didn't even think that TV would last.
I didn't even know it was a thing.
But anyway, that's how it all began, and this is how it ends for us, because we've finally reached the end of the alphabet.
Z.
And that is Gail, and that is our tribute to her. I think
Well
you're
done,
just
Michael.
applauding ourselves.
No, you did a good job on this.
Well, you did it as well.
Oh,
you
I
said
was here.
things. I thought that the alphabet format has worked quite well. I mean, it's gone on for a little bit longer than we thought it would. We said 2 hours.
We
at the
said
beginning,
5
and
minutes for each one, and that would have taken us to 2 hours exactly.
Yeah, well,
and we still haven't done the exit.
We've still not recorded the exit bit. So I
don't know. She might still be in it.
Maybe it's all a fake out.
Maybe she dies.
Yeah,
could do.
Well, anyway, look, we're going to end it
Maybe
there.
Jessie dies.
Gail is an absolute icon, legend of Coronation
I can't believe
Street.
it.
I can't believe
it's
that
the end
she's
of an
gone.
era.
When I heard that she was leaving earlier this year, I was, in a way, I was kind of sad. There was widespread grief among internet people, wasn't there? But I was also kind of thinking, well, she's not been in it much recently anyway. But
it feels like
I think when she's actually gone, you're going to feel her departure.
It's going to be sad.
Just knowing that there's no chance we're going to see her again, most likely.
I know. That's actually made me feel really sad to know that's the end of her, because she's been, there's that hilarious Harry Hill song about Ken being the only constant in your life, but Gail is the same, because I wasn't around when Ken was in it originally. I would say I wasn't even around when Gail was in it originally.
No, there are very few characters that started the show before we were even born. And now we've just lost another one. We got Rita still knocking about, and Ken still
Audrey. There's still a few, but every year their numbers will dwindle, and it is really sad to say goodbye to somebody who has been such an important part of Coronation Street and had so many big stories, so many great quotes, memes. The great iconic Bob. I mean, what could you say? We've spoken so much about her already. This is our tribute. Thank you, Helen Worth. Thank you, Catherine Helen Wrigglesworth, for working so many years on creating something that's been beloved by people not just in this country but around the world.
Absolutely. Well, I think we will end it there then. Nice little tribute.
Ta-ra, Chuck.
Thank you everybody for listening, and we will be back later this week with our thoughts on this week's festive Coronation Street. But until then, we're going to leave it.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Gail, for everything. Thank you for listening. Ta-ra.